Those of you who have run from the cops and didn't get caught, what's your story? Oh man, one I can finally contribute to. This one was a while back. I'm 32 now, so this had to have happened when I was like 13-14 maybe. Anyway, a bunch of my friends and I had gathered to play manhunt. Essentially hide and seek with teams. Except we went all out. We all wore all black, played at night, and definitely hid in places where we shouldn't. Neighbors' backyards, under their cars, etc. Anyhow, everything was going great this night. Everyone is having fun. I got made, scoped out, and had to ditch the current spot I was in, and started heading out towards an intersection in my neighborhood. Out of nowhere I heard a speeding car. It slams on the brakes, and I hear a booming voice, "Get on the ground, now." Oh fuck. I instantly turned heel, and booked it back down the street that I had came from. I hear footsteps gaining on me, and got super nervous, but the cop must have saw someone else in closer proximity, because he turned 90 degrees, and started chasing them. I'm still running for my damn life when I hear, "Yo, you/Riesajenks 520, over here." I turned to the right to see my best friend hiding under a van in someone's driveway, so I jumped under there with him. We hid there for about 2 more minutes, but more and more cop cars were showing up, and I hear my best friend say, "Man, fuck this," and he takes off jumping fences/backyards of houses leading back to his place. I followed suit. Somehow we made it, and he gave me a change of clothes, a white t-shirt and white hat, and told me I had to go, because his parents were getting suspicious. Luckily the game of manhunt had started at his house, so my bike was there. I definitely rode my bike home the long way. On my way home I saw cops looking through bushes and yards with K9 units and flashlights, but because I was wearing essentially all white, and on a bike, I guess I didn't fit the description of the guys that they were looking for. They even brought a chopper out in the search point. Funny part is, everyone that got caught and rounded up was sat on the curb literally across the street from my house. So I saw my friends in handcuffs as I rode by. I was terrified that they'd rat me out for some reason, but they didn't. My parents still give me shit for that one. They, naturally, were worried that I'd end up one of the ones in handcuffs. Edit. The reason the cops went all out like that was because somebody had reported that they heard someone on their roof and thought they were attempting to break in. We weren't. We weren't about that life. We just went really hard when it came to manhunt. Pretty sure that's the last time we played manhunt. House party in HS. About 30 to 40 kids in a basement drinking, smoking. Suddenly cops walk down the stairs. Someone just let them in. Tell us to sit tight and nobody go anywhere. Cops walk back upstairs. We're all wasted. I finagle a window open and help my friends and a couple brave souls up and out. I get out, run for a fence my friends just hopped. Cop grabs me, hauls me back into the house. Neglect to put me back in the basement. It's my friend's house, so I pretend to belong. Open the fridge, grab a Mountain Dew. Cop walks in with bag of 100 breathalyzer tubes. I meander to the living room by the front door, wait for the clear, casually walk out the front door. Make it 3 steps and spotlight hits me. Cop yells at me. I meander back in. Just by the front door, spotlight turns off. I wait 5 seconds, faking bolt out the front door again. Leap off front porch, sprint through front yards for 4 blocks, until I'm in a field. Lay flat and call friends. Cops patrol by with spotlight, can't see me, go back to the house. Friends pick me up. I have a lot these. We were really good at almost getting caught for stupid shit. TLDR, escaped a house party surrounded by cops. Edit. This was early 2000s in a suburb in the United States. They took underage drinking very seriously. If caught, you got a minor in possession ticket. Fine and court fees were $300 to $500. So 30 plus tickets that night would net the county quite a bit of cash. We had a lot of kids showing up in hospitals with alcohol poisoning around that time too. So they were trying to help, maybe. First time was back when I was about 14 to 15 years old. A friend of mine insisted on going to the local park to smoke a joint. He said he did it all the time despite my concern. Did it anyway because stupid, but as we bake ourselves to outer space, I notice a figure walking towards us that looked like a guy walking his dog. Turned out to be a cop with no dog, but far enough away for me to tell my friend with what little sense I had left to slowly get on his bike and start making our way towards the end of the park by a canal. Park was in a clearing, so we hang a left into the woods, convince him to dump what was a week's worth of weed, and make it to the nearest intersection where 3 cop cars pull up and search our ass. Technically got caught, but didn't have shit on us, so they took our names and addresses and went on their merry way. Second time was on the highway, doing about 90 on the far left lane, but on a section that curved right, so by the time I saw the state troopers it was too late, so committed to my speed for a bit past the curve. Saw him start turning around to come get me, but I casually slowed down and started making my way to the far right lane. By the time I got there, a semi was pulling up on the lane to my left, so I used him to keep me out of line of sight from the cops and slowed to 65. Switched lanes to be behind him as the cops passed ahead, then went back around on his left as the cops floored it to the closest exit, thinking I must have bailed off the highway. Great success, was 19 at the time, so the stupid shit is well and over with these days. Used to live right by a lake. Every night, we would go smoke at this shitty beach that you had to climb rocks to get down to. A really safe spot, but not much of a viewpoint. A few blocks down, there was an actual city park with a nice beach at the end and an absolutely gorgeous view of the Toronto skyline. It was so wonderful. I mention how we are dumb for never using this spot. So we start setting up the pong and spreading our stuff out when my roommate says, "Dude, I think the cops are here." I'm usually the paranoid one who says that, but this time I turned to him and laughed, "Nah man, you're just paranoid." And then I turned to the parking lot to see a cop flying up to the end of it. We were smoking illegally and trespassing since it was after park close, so we instantly booked it. There's a setup of large rocks around the lake. I'm holding the backpack, bong, and grinder as I run across them, and then just start throwing everything down between the rocks as I'm running. We ran about a block on these rocks and hid under a tree for 40 minutes. We went back home, but we weren't quite done. If we just left our stuff on the rocks, some stoner would take it in the morning. So we went back a couple hours later, and I fell in the lake trying to recover all my stuff. I got everything back except the grinder. Not necessarily running from the cops, but the last night in my hometown, before I left for college, 3 good friends and I went to a park to get high before seeing a movie. As we were toking away on top of this little playground, I noticed 2 cop cars driving slowly towards us. Before I could even point them out, the cars start shining their flashlights on us. 2 of my friends booked it into the woods behind us, while me and the other guy panicked and jumped under the playground. For what seemed like an eternity, the cops kept walking back and forth past the tiny playground into the woods. They eventually found one friend who got lost in the woods and gave himself up, but the other somehow made it through and ran all the way home. They never looked under what seemed to be literally the only other place someone could be hiding. Eventually my hiding partner had to give himself up because the cops were threatening to tow his car. The kid who got caught texted him, "I don't understand how they didn't see us," as they kept shining their lights on the playground, which had very little cover. After everyone had been gone from the park for at least a half hour, my paranoidas finally mustered up the courage to pull out my phone and check on everyone. I remember thinking that the cops were still staked out to catch me. Turns out everyone was at the theater waiting for me. In the end of the night, movie was and the cops were pretty nice to my friends and just let them off with a warning. I didn't grow up in the nicest area, so I'm sure the cops had more to worry about than some teenagers smoking weed. This is it. This is my moment. When I was young, 15 I think, I was doing the classic drinking in a field with friends, 2-liter bottles of disgusting cider etc. We were having a blast, pretty wasted at about 10, when a couple of police cars showed up, and they came running out towards us. Everyone scattered as fast as humanly possible, and me and my friend stuffed out cider into our bags and hid in a tiny patch of trees. I'm in a massive clearing in woods by train tracks. In the middle of the clearing is literally a 10-meter in diameter patch of trees. So we hide inside, and the police go chasing everyone else who have scattered like ants over Cake Point. We give it some time, breathing heavily, time slowly dancing past us. We are nervous. What if we go prison? We wouldn't survive in prison. You know, we were drunk and young and stupid and rather convinced this was it for our basic freedom and human rights. So eventually the tension got too much, and we left the patch of trees. Fuck. Straight ahead of us are the police, but they don't seem to have seen us. What do we do? Patch of trees or run? Or, my friend turns to me and goes, "I've got a plan apostrophe." I'm like, "That's faking great. What is it?" He says, "Follow me," and walks towards the cops. Now, I was a relatively inexperienced criminal, but I don't think you should walk directly at the police in a time like this. We had alcohol stuffed into our bags and we were faking wasted point, but I follow him. What else am I gonna do? The police, I ask knowingly, like, who are these idiots? We know what's up. They can't fool us. Hello. Stop there please. What are you doing out at this time? One asks us. They have raised eyebrows, smug expressions, and I'm resigned to my fate. We just needed some. My friend pauses. Private time. He says it with such ingenious suggestion and confidence that the cops pause, smile, and then instantly assume we are a pair of gay teenagers out in the woods for a good time who have been caught with the drunk kids. I'm trying to hold it together. Trying not to laugh, scream, fetched, and run. Trying to look gay, whatever that means. He lets us pass, smiles at us, and tells us to go. The idiot. Or maybe he just enjoyed the lie, I don't know. So off we pop, down this dirt path, and towards the local town where my friend lived. We are home and free. We weren't going to prison. I could still become everything I wanted to be. I haven't. By the way, my phone rings. It's the police. Come back now, or we're coming after you. Your friend gave us your number. We're being serious. One of my friends ratted me out, the bastard. Point, well, fuck that. So I hang up and we run. We make it to town, order Chinese food, and play Halo at his house until my mum picks me up and has a massive go at me for being drunk. I was still wasted on the idea, but hey, it's a cool story. Well, I grew up in a rural but affluent area, so we had a lot of cops and weed wasn't as easy to come by as in many other places. One spring we decided to start growing weed, and since we were all underage we asked some dude from my village to drive with us to a nearby European country where we could legally acquire cuttings. We planted them in a cornfield outside of our village, and when the time came to harvest we drove there at night with our bikes, while the one guy who was over 18 came with his car. We roughly manicured the butts and put them in trash bags. We were divided on whether to put them in the car or not. I was for it, because I'm a lazy ass, but decided not to risk it. Well, the guy with the car drove off, and we followed him on our bikes, when the single most scary moment in my life happened. To put it into perspective, while teens are stupid and arrogant, we were still aware that what we did would actually land us in jail. If caught, as we had the equivalent of more than a pound of dry weed on us, in a country and time that didn't see weed the way we do now, and wandering through forests and cornfields at night did the rest. So we were driving behind this guy, tense but happy, when a police car that had been waiting turned on its faking lights right in front of our friend's car. We were maybe 200 meters behind, and to this day I have never experienced that kind of panic. We turned around and took the fuck off, and long story short, they didn't see us. Our friend had nothing on him, and we got away with a scare and a shit ton of weed. Lol. TLDR, at the bottom during college, some lads and I had drunkenly decided we would steal some streetlight banners from a local festival. Without much planning due to our inebriated overconfidence, we biked over to the festival grounds and the nimblest among us immediately started shimmying up the streetlight, while the others looked out for cops. As it turned out, the lookouts weren't the best recruits for the job, because cop lights immediately illuminated us from across the street. Conveniently, I was parking our bikes out of sight from the street, and so was just below our level of the road near a long line of cleared out event tents. To give you a sense of things, there were about 20 nondescript, white, heavy canvas 8 feet cube tents all lined up side by side with one side open and all other sides walled off. The collective open side faced away from the road, so I, wizened by the liquor I had consumed, immediately ducked behind one. Now the wait was on. In a slit in the tent's wall, I could see as my other friends talked to the officer as 4 other police cars showed up. Eventually, one of the officers saw the bikes, counted them, put 2 and 2 together, and started heading towards the only visible hiding place, the tents. At this point, my freshman, drunk, paranoid as hell was fully clenched, and I was practically shivering from nonsensical visions of getting kicked out of school and thrown in jail were I caught. As the officer arrived the tent line, I could only see his flashlight go in and out of every tent, taunting me with its inevitability pointers a noose tight end around my neck. I had an idea. It would require luck, nerves, and most importantly, control of my motor functions, none of which I had at the moment, but I had to try. For you see, halfway down the tent line, 1 away from me, there were some tents that were set up perpendicular to the others, so that their opening faced the beginning of the tent line and the officer would have to step away from the line to inspect them. My idea, for all of its brilliance, was to duck into that tent when the officer next looked into a tent, and hope he was too lazy to check it point in an instant. I successfully pulled off my maneuver, and surprisingly the cop didn't notice. Just as planned, the cop passed me by, went back to the main group empty-handed, and eventually left. After talking to my friends bursting with beer-fueled arrogance at the beauty of my escape, I puffed up my chest and went to talk to my friends, who had waited for me, knowing I was nearby. As I began to regale them in my tale of wit and daring do, my friends cut me off and told me that they had given up my name anyways when questioned about the extra bike point. Ended up, the cops were nice about everything and just told the college, which called it a day. After we baked lasagna for a local homeless shelter TLDR, I drunkenly ran from the cops after attempting to commit extremely petty vandalism, but got ratted out anyways. TLDR at the bottom, but you wanted a story so here it goes. Friends and I are experimenting with drugs, early high school teen years. We bought some close to empty vial of LSD, drop it in water, yeah, whatever, and pass it around so everyone can at least sort of trip. Point well, there was more LSD in the vial than we originally though, so we all start to get high, and we honestly couldn't really judge how much we were ingesting. There were 5 people drinking on this water LSD mixture, which was in a whiskey glass. So we are all hanging out, waiting to start tripping. Fast forward to around 11:30 to 12 am, we decided it'd be a good idea to head to the pool. We are in an apartment complex, so not allowed because it's locked. We walk down and see that no one is in the pool area, faking sick. This is gonna be great. Maybe 5 minutes later, we see someone hop the fence. Dude sits down, and he's faking cranked, sniffing a bunch and looking around, shirtless and swim trunks. Sick, dude's coked out, and wanted a night swim too. Suddenly, 2 girls come through this gate, and then a guy with a 30 rack of beer. They're all yelling, like it's a block party at what is now 12:30 am. Multiple people start cannonballing into the pool, in the jacuzzi, that I'm in at this point. There's this little man talking about tripping his balls off on peyote, all the while I'm looking around at this mess. I'm seeing bubbles just surfacing and bending on the concrete. It reminded me of geysers and hot springs. Anyway, we're chatting with these people and I look over and see someone else walking in through the gate. This man is fully dressed, and I turn to my friend and say, "Yo, that's trouble." Confused, they look over and stare for the duration of this man walking towards everyone who is starting to pack up their belongings while saying, "Y'all better not run, I'm gonna get one of your names." My friends jumped straight out the jacuzzi and started running around collecting our things. Me being 16 or so, I stop and actually talk to this guy. Asks where I live, if I live in the apartments, if I know trespassing is a $500 fine and a night in jail. Nope, didn't know that. I'm not going to jail high on acid. Man turns around and starts trying to wrangle in more people, and my other friend and I look at each other and just faking book it out of the pool. Did the whole body jump thing you see in movies over the fence, zigzagged between apartment complexes, ran up to meet my other friends who made it first. Point one guy has the door open for us, and I'm the last one in, but as soon as I step foot in the doorway, I immediately start vomiting. I rush to the bathroom to puke more and just see shapes bouncing off the floor and faces all around the tiles. I know it's not technically the cops, and there were way more of us than there were of this small, bending man, but being high on LSD and hearing jail fees, I'm gonna get you at 15 is faking scary point TLDR. High on LSD at an apartment complex pool, security comes in and threatens little 16-year-old kid with jail and fees, flees and vomits in friend's house. When I was 15, me and about 5 friends wanted to go to a Denny's to hang out, drink some coffee and smoke some cigs, but we needed gas to get there and back, so one of my friends suggested we go and siphon some gas from a car in town. After collecting the water hose and empty can, we started driving around looking for our mark. We found a car parked outside of an apartment complex next some bushes that we could hide by while we were filling the can. The car had the gas cap under the license plate, which took us a bit to find. Meanwhile, our other friends were waiting up the road to turn on their lights as a signal that a car was coming. Just as the gas can was about half full, I noticed a car turn up the road and our friend's headlights came on as they quickly drove away down a side street. I was just pulling out the hose to hide in the bush with my friend when the red and blue lights started to flash and my friend yells, "Run, it's the cops, we are faked now." So we start to run and we hear the doors of the car shut behind us as the cops yelled, "Stop where you are." We ran alongside the complex and to a fence that had a cow field on the other side. Luckily one of the fence boards was loose, so we squeezed through sideways and kept running. One of the cops could fit through and continued to chase us, telling us to stop, but we kept running full sprint to the other side of the field that had a 6-foot hog wire fence that we scaled over. Some low-income housing was on the other side and we ran through that to a wooded area that I knew had a trail that lead to the road back to our friend's house about a mile away. Luckily there was ditched and brush to hide in, because about halfway to my friend's house we jumped into the ditch as we saw headlights coming, and sure enough it was Tafaz again driving around with their spotlight on. We made it back to our friend's house where they were waiting to see what happened, and with a half-full gas can that my friend refused to leave, we filled up the car and were just about to leave to Denny's when my friend's brother came home, heard the story and just gave us $40 and told us to have a good night after laughing his ass off for about 2 minuets. When I was younger and much dumber, I had a group of friends who rented a house from one of the friends' dads. It was on Main Street and we could see the cop shop from the front window, and they paid the rent by selling pretty large amounts of weed and psychedelics, but that's a whole other long story. Anyway, the week after we had my 18th birthday party, we had one for another girl that got busted because of a noise complaint. This wasn't a normal house party raid though. We left those cops outside from about 10:30 to a little after midnight. One idiot who lived in the house yelled, "I'm gonna get my gun." So they waited for a warrant and called in like 5 other small town squads and our closest big city who came with SWAT. It was a crazy couple of hours with a lot of shenanigans, but 96 people had to go to court. One got away without anything because she wasn't drunk. About 5 people climbed into the crawl space attic and I got away with my weed. One of my shoes was in another room, and after I was searched I asked to go get my shoe and a friend was laying on the bed. He ended up with alcohol poisoning. When I put my hand on the bed to lean down and see if he was okay, I put my hand right on my weed. I knew it was mine because I had been laying there when he came to lay down after puking, and I heard get down on the ground, now." And I was like, well, might as well get up and see what's going on. Turns out the only person who's 21 was also on parole and he tried to run alone. Dude ended up kicking out the back window of the cop car and opening the front door, getting his ID and sheet, and running, but this beach he was with gave them all his info including his freaking SS. Like I said, lots of shenanigans. Anyway, I go on the front porch where there's a male cop breathalyzing the males and female cop for the females. I get in line, and there's a couple in front of me who get breathalyzed, and then there's some kind of commotion and the male cop says, "Anyone who was breathalyzed stand over here." So I just kinda moved to the side with the couple. It was only a minute or two before the male says to us, "You guys were breathalyzed?" I giggled at that and nodded my head. Then the female cop says to me, "Oh, what about you?" And I said, "Hey, I'm good," and proceeded to walk into a cop car and then down the street to where my friend's dad was picking me up. So much hilarious happened that night, but also looking back it cold ended up really bad for us. A couple years back, had just turned 18, got a scholarship, headed off to college soon. I'm from Chicago, and my friends and I enjoyed a pastime known as urban exploring, essentially breaking into interesting abandoned buildings to find old relics, photograph urban decay, reclamation by nature, etc. Not to brag, but we were some of the best in the biz anyway. Myself and 2 others drove out to a suburb to break into a very recently abandoned hospital. This one was riskier than normal because parts of the building still had power, i.e. active alarms, some radiology equipment, and wasn't entirely cleared of medical records. This did make for some really nice photos, but also made it an understandably higher priority for law enforcement than say, an abandoned school. This hospital was pretty huge, but there was a smaller radiology wing that was connected to the rest of the building by a single hallway. It was while we were in there that police arrived. We aren't sure if we triggered an alarm or if someone saw us from a window and called on us, but we saw the police pull up from the 2nd floor. The connecting hallway was on the 1st floor, so we tried to make our way down, but the cops had already entered the building. We were able to make our way to a small room with wide open double doors on opposite ends. One of these double doors opened into a hallway that was being patrolled by an officer with a K9. This hallway was also our only route to the main building, which was large enough that we could probably successfully evade and escape. All 3 of us stood behind an open door in the corner, watching the officer and K9 walk up and down the hallway through the hinge, but we had seen multiple cars pull up outside, so we only had so much time until someone checked the room from the other entrance, from which we were plainly visible. Thank God we hadn't recently smoked weed or brought any, because we would have been found by the dog immediately. Thank God none of our phones rang. Whenever that officer passed the door, he couldn't have been more than 5 to 10 feet from us. After walking up and down the hallway a few times, the officer and dog briefly rounded a corner, and we made a stealthy break for it. We made it to the main building, got a map of the building from a posted fire escape packet, and found a way out with no cops in sight. Walked to my friend's car parked in a residential area, and drove past the cops on our way home, still looking for us. Man, this prompt makes me realize I have too many of these stories myself. My brother and my friend are back in my hometown on the way to see a movie. We had just finished toking and were coming to a speed change from 45 to 35. I told my friend to slow down, but my request fell on deaf ears as he cruised right along at 40 miles per hour. Sure enough, the next car we pass is one of the boys in blue, making sure we are late to the movie. Cop pulls the U with his sights set on us, but hasn't hit the lights yet. I toss everything into the seat as survival instinct kicks in, as I think how my mom would crucify my brother and I if we were arrested smoking together. Before the cop makes it all the way around, I tell my friend, take your next right into this restaurant, park in the back, and get inside. Luckily he didn't see our faces as we make it through the doors right as the cop made it to the vehicle. He then proceeds to sit on it. We figure, fuck it, we'll catch a later movie and just grab some lunch and wait this out. Now you have to realize, local PD doesn't have much to do, so terrorizing the local potheads is as good as it gets for them. About an hour and a half has passed, and only more cops have arrived, now with 3 squad cars covering every exit. Coming up on hour 3 and the story is still the same. What must be the entire force is waiting to see who claims the white sedan. Leaving in the car we came in is out of the question. We ultimately ended up getting a ride with a buddy back to my place, where we grabbed my car and made the movie at a much later showing. The kicker is, when we went to pick up the car 9 hours later, there was still an undercover lurking. Ended up not retrieving it until the following morning. TLDR, speeding with weed in the car, cop tries to pull me over. Got away and hid in a restaurant while a bunch of cops waited for someone who would never show. In high school, my parents' friends had horses, but they didn't ride much, and I had friends who rode well. Free access to horses for a bunch of broke genes. This was before cell phones were popular. We went on trail rides. The community center had a cross-country course that we took random jumps over with these out-of-shape horses. We rode through drive-thrus which sometimes freaked out people in cars, raced each other on dirt roads toward blind corners, all sorts of fun things that could have resulted in our senseless deaths. It was a horse-oriented town, so none of that got us in trouble. Being teenagers, we got cocky. One summer trail ride, we walked the horses off the road and stopped under some trees for shade, as we'd been out for hours and had covered some miles. Must have belonged to some paranoid bastard or been an unfenced orchard, because 15 minutes later, cops roll up, lights on. Cops in that town were known for harassing teens to get the slightest probable cause. Being on the original ATV, we faked off through the trees, over the lawn, and up the hill behind the house, down the ravine on the other side, followed the dry riverbed back into town, bathed and put the horses up, and laughed hours off at our masterful escape. I'm not sure if the trees stopped the cops, or if it took them too long to drive around on the dirt road and we'd managed to get out of sight. We did hear the sirens get closer, or a second car, but the horses were rested enough to gallop, and we had the fear of our parents urging us on. It's a wonder the horses made it without tripping. It didn't stop us from making dumb choices on future rides, but we were a bit more aware of when we were trespassing. In the town I grew up in the Caribbean, on Halloween after late is when all the teenagers came out to play. There were a lot of crews all in a small town area, and we were armed with paintball guns, fruits, rocks, eggs, etc., and basically went to war. Well, we heard cops were already around looking for people to confiscate their paintball guns, so we took different positions to shoot the cars with our paintball guns. We got their cars a bit and ran like hell was chasing us, and they lost us. After a bit we ran to a building that was under construction and we went to the roof, since there aren't that many taller buildings than that, and we had a good view of the streets. We see that the cops are near and looking around the area we were in, so we decide to get out of there so we wouldn't get trapped. Well, the building was right next to the school and everyone decides to get in the school to hide. About 3 or 4 of the crew made it, and then right down the driveways of the school we see the lights. They caught us all trying to trespass into a school. I was the short chubby kid on the group, so I was not over the wall yet. As soon as I see them, everyone just splits. I knew I wasn't gonna make it over the wall with no help, so I just ran to the woods that were behind the school. I ran like maybe 40 yards and dropped to the dirt to see if they were gonna look for me. I knew some of the cops chased the ones that made it into the school, and they were not about to get all dirty looking for me. So after about 15 minutes or so of me in the dirt, I see the cops in front of me leave. Now all I needed to do was cross the street, cause our meetup point and my car were right across from the street of the building we first went into. Now this is when I turn into a 16-year-old solid snake and go back to the construction side of the building. This is where I find one of my friends and we make it right to the corner of the building and the house my car is. So we kinda reckon the area and there are cops still around. At one point I step into a pool of wet cement, so I had a foot covered up to my ankle in cement. After a few minutes some cops leave, but like 2 or 3 of them stay, and we see them walk into the driveway, and that's when we book it to the house that we started up at and made it look like we were inside the whole time and were just leaving. They didn't notice us. The ones that were chased across the school outran the cops, but one dropped his paintball gun. Some others hiked the woods to another part of town, and everyone else that ran made it out without being caught. Not exactly running from the cops, but summertime, my cousin and I were out stealing flags off of golf course hole markers in the middle of the night. We go to one 45 minutes from our town. Last one of the night. We parked in a small parking lot for a park that was closed after dark. Proceeded to go walk the golf course and pick a flag point. On our way back to the car, we see a cop car pull into where we are parked. We duck out of view and wait for him to leave. He doesn't point. I have an idea. Next to the golf course is a bunch of houses. We go to the nearest road among the houses, find a large pine tree, and take off our clothes, all but our under t-shirts and basketball shorts. We always wore basketball shorts under our jeans and our sneakers. We leave the flags with our clothes. We take off jogging towards the cops. Sweaty and out of breath, we get to the car. They question us, and I tell them that we run cross country for our high school and we like to go out at night and run different places we aren't familiar with because it helps us train our footing on unfamiliar terrain. They check our IDs, make sure there are no warrants for us, and let us go and tell us not to park there anymore because it's a known local homosexual meetup spot, and they patrol to make sure no one is faking in the park after dark. They let us go. Somehow, when they were shining their lights in the car, they missed all the other flags and stuff we had snagged earlier in the night from other courses. We drive off, wait a few, and drive back to that tree and grab our clothes, and head home. We may or may not still have the flags. Still can't believe that worked. My junior year of high school, the week before I graduated, I was told I was moving across the country again. Even though I had spent the last 8 years of my life there, I was pissed. So I started acting all rebellious. So I took a real risk with this crazy chick in my forensics class, got piss drunk for the first time, various shit, but I decided to go tagging with another new friend of mine. He and I decided at 11:30 it would be a good time to break into school grounds and tag a piece we were working on, but when we pulled up a cop was waiting outside. So we pulled our masks on and flashed our flashlight at him. He flashed his lights at us, boom we dipped. This happened in southern as by the way, so imagine a barren desert with human hide brush everywhere. We hopped a barbed wire fence and laid flat down while also shoving spray paint cans in our packs. We made sure not to bring wallets or wear t-shirts that could be associated to us. We thought this out so we could throw them and be able to run easier. We were next to the highway so we waited, and a few seconds later he drive by with his lights on. We wait a split second then hop the barbed wire fence, and legged it across the highway, and hopped another fence, and then just kept running till we recognized something to find our way home. Scariest moment of my life so far. Somehow though my friend got recognized by the cop cause he forgot his mask, and it was the same weekend seniors did their senior prank and tagged the school. Dumb sheet like 420 blaze on all the school buses and dented in bus doors. Then he dropped my name and we both almost got charged, but with other sheet to worry about with underage drinking and driving with graduation weekend. They inevitably dropped it, and I didn't even end up moving senior year, and got to graduate with my friend's senior year. Make better choices. It was great point TLDR. Friend and I tried to tag the school cause I thought I was moving soon. Got chased by a cop in a car while we were on foot through Arizona underbrush at midnight. Somehow got caught anyways cause my friend ratted, but case got dropped. Not really full on running, really just got lucky and the cop got distracted. Point had just bought my 16 Mustang. Great. Been a long time since I drove a manual, so I had been just driving and cruising around after work getting used to rowing through the gears again. I'm faking around with it, and I pull down a 55 miles per hour street to head towards the gas station near my work I always get gas at. Was time to top up again. I decide to get frisky, punch it at a light, and get on it a little bit. Car is new to me, a lot faster than the car I traded in. I'm not doing 55, I'm doing like 70. Whoops, hair point. I also see a car just sitting on the side of the road. It a cop. Fuck, probably a cop. I downshift and let the engine slow me. As I pass him, I'm probably doing 60 now. Well, 5 miles over the limit ain't shit, right? I'm sure he heard the pitch of my engine and exhaust and knew I was downshifting anyways. I probably wasn't being as sneaky as I hoped by not lighting my brake lights up like a Christmas tree. Point sure enough, headlights turn on, and I see him pulling out behind me. Also, my gas station is right here. I pull in. There is another cop here, his lights are lit up, and he has a truck pulled over. The truck decided to apparently pull in and stop at one of the pumps to receive his ticket. In an awkward move, I say fuck it. I pull in at the pump directly next to this truck and cop and proceed to gas up. The cop that pulled out on the road behind me parks across the street. There's a Chevron gas station right across the street from the Maverick I got gas from. The Chevron is closed and dark as fuck at this time of night. Maybe the pumps are still open, I don't know. But the place is in total darkness, so maybe not. Cop sits there and is just watching me, and I'm going fuck. He's gonna wait me out till I'm done and then pull me over. As I'm finishing pumping, a third cop shows up. He goes across the street and parks next to the cops taking me out. They roll down windows and are talking, and I just straight up left lol. Lots of cops out that night, lots of vehicles pulled over. They were all definitely on the prowl that night. Maybe this guy just saw the paper plates still on my car and figured fuck it, give the kid a break. He got an ample enough warning to slow it down tonight. I have 3 2.5 were successful. Point first one. Driving home from work as a teenager. First time locking up and taking a big envelope of cash to the bank. Took a curve onto the main road in town well above the speed limit. Oncoming police officer from another town. We didn't have police. Passes in the other direction. Flips on his lights. Based on his distance away and knowing the neighborhood, I plotted my escape plan. Took my first turn. Random old people driving slow delayed me long enough for the police car to get to that street before my turn. I changed plans. Went a different way. He pulled me over. Told him I was nervous having so much money on me. Explained I was taking it from work to the bank. And my made up story for why I turned off the road that had the bank. He bought it. Let me go my merry way. Time number 2. Still a teenager. Slightly older. But still stupid. Recently moved to the city. Driving down one of the main roads. Cavalier pulls up next to us with 2 attractive girls. I roll down my passenger window and my passenger strikes up a conversation. Light goes green. We drive. Repeat at the next light. Going again. They made a turn down another major route. I take the next turn. Fly down that road and turn back towards the route they went down. We see them go by, but her light is red, and stays red, and stays red, and stays red. So I make an illegal left, turn through a red light onto the busiest street downtown. Then I punch the gas to catch the girls. Passing a side street 40% above the limit and still accelerating. Notice a police car on that street. Watch the mirror. He begins pulling out. No lights yet. We took an unsignaled right onto another route and another immediate right into an alley, which was very icy because I do this sheet in winter. We are sliding sideways as we try crawl through this alley. Watching the rear view, see the police car go down the route we just turned off. So we turn out of the alley and head away from that police officer in my red truck in a sea of black and white cars. We pass a police officer going the other direction on that street. Watch the mirror. He pulls a U-turn. No lights. So I randomly go down more side streets. On one of these side streets we see another police vehicle who also happens to start turning around after passing us. That was a last sighting. None of the police vehicles ever had their lights on. Could have been coincidence, but it was stressful as hell. Point time number 3. Still a dumb teenager. Going home from work again. Rolling, or not really slowing down much, through a stop sign. Realize there's an unmarked police vehicle going the other way. Circa 2003 our unmarked cars could be spotted from blocks away quite easily. Watch the mirror. He starts turning around. So I make some random turns, park at a house, and lie across the seat of the truck. After 10 to 15 minutes I proceed on my waypoint, so really I can't confirm he was after me, but I suspected he was enough to bolt. So 3 times in 18 months, 0 times since in 15 years. Okay, bit of backstory here. I was the most boring, studious and law-abiding stereotype of Asian guy who's focused on his studies, but wasn't well off, and ended up going to a community college in a not so great area. I was a bit out of my element, and this is how it almost bit me in the ass. My first year of college I was walking downtown to meet up with some of my friends after class. I didn't have a car back then, and the bus schedule was so bad that it was faster to walk if it was a short distance. So this car suddenly pulled up behind me, braking way too abruptly, and it drew my attention immediately. The part of town I was walking through was a bit sketchy, and my first thought was that I was going to be the next drive-by victim. I didn't know it was the cops who pulled up behind me, only that anyone pulling up like that after dark in that part of the city is probably not doing it to ask for directions. So I immediately legged it down a side street, turning it down to a light, jog when the vehicle didn't follow. Then a cop turns the corner, absolutely hauling ass, and screaming at me to stop. I remember thinking for a second that it was unmistakably a cop. I didn't do anything. I should probably just hold up. But I'd already started running from him and changed my mind fast. He looked and sounded like he wanted to kick my ass. After that brief moment of hesitation I was gone again. He sounded like he got pretty close for a few moments. I didn't turn to check, but after 100 meters or so I could tell he was falling behind. Then after a few blocks I finally turned to check behind me. He was still chasing, but had fallen way behind. When I ran across a pretty busy street, and he didn't seem to follow me across, that's when I lost him. After that I made my way to the meetup spot wondering what they thought I did. My brother, who by all accounts made poor choices when he was 15, got into a legendary chase with lasting implications. It was New Year's around 2 AM and my brother was walking home from a party on the opposite end of town. He, like most kids that age, was wearing a backpack, and I guess that's what triggered the cop to pull him over, or at least attempt to pull him over. So cop turns on cherries and drives towards my brother, who is walking through an industrial area. Brother panicked and decided running was better than facing my parents after being busted, so he hoofs it towards the back of the building, where he knows there is an opening in the fence, while the cop speeds up to cut him off. The police officer either misjudged the amount of ice on the ground, and instead of turning towards the escaping kid, he hits the building dead on with his cruiser and my brother escapes. The escape did not last long as backup arrived quick and managed to arrest him, handcuff him, and drive him home to have a chat with my father. The cop has decided to charge my brother with both reckless endangerment and public intoxication. My father loses his shit on the police officer by stating the cruiser could have just as likely hit my brother, and why are they chasing children in their car in the first place point. So cop is steaming mad and takes it upon himself to call our house and informed my mother that the court date had been moved back 2 weeks. My father suspected something was off and showed up for court with my brother on the original day, and yes, the trail was indeed that day point. What a debacle. And my friend were like 20ish, and there was this abandoned barn you could see from the highway point. Well, we lived pretty close to it and decided to head out at night and explore it to see if there is anything cool there. Point, it was winter and we were a little concerned there might be homeless people sneaking shelter there, so we brought baseball bats just in case we were attacked. Point, we also decided that we should bring as many beers as we can carry. We start to walk there from a friend's house who lives walking distance to the barn. The problem is that the barn is hidden by some trees and you have to walk through a field from a local street. But it was like 11 PM and minimal traffic. Point, just our luck, a cop flashes his lights as we are about a quarter way through the field. Point, now we are underage with like 10 beers and baseball bats in the middle of the night, and a cop catches up. My friend and I are like, fuck, what do we do? I tell him drop the baseball bats and maybe he will not see them. Point, a second patrol car pulls up, and as the first cop is asking is what we are doing, the second cop sees the bats and asks why we dropped them. Point, we said we didn't want to approach an officer with a weapon. He said good answer. He then took my wallet to check my ID and saw a photo of my at the time girlfriend and she's smoking. At this point we were pretty sure we were not going to get in trouble, so we asked him if we ran, do you think we could have gotten away? He said that we would get away from him, but not his dog, and gestured to his car which had the words K9 unit. Point, end of the story was that he took down our info, made us dump out the beer, and said if there are any reports of vandalism in the area, that he would follow up with us. He gave us the bats and told us to go home. I'm standing in the basement, and I'm holding a red cup you've seen in movies. And I'm standing there, and I'm holding a red cup, and I'm starting to black out, and I guess someone said like something police, and in a brilliant moment of word association, I yelled fuck DA police. Fuck DA police. And everyone else joined in. 100 drunk white children yelling fuck da police with the confidence of guys who have already been to jail and aren't afraid of it anymore. You know, like the I served my nickel, you come and take me confidence. But white children. Point, the reason someone had said something police was because the police were there. So a Chicago police officer walked down the stairs and got to the bottom in the basement and looked out over a sea of drunk toddlers yelling fuck the police in his face. He was almost impressed. He was like whispering wow. And then he leaned into his walkie-talkie, and my friend John, who is now father, this man now has a baby, he grabbed a 40, smashed it on the ground and yelled scatter, and everyone ran in a different direction. We all ran in different directions. It was like that scene in Ratatouille when the humans come in the kitchen and all the rats go in different ways. We all ran in different directions. I ran into the laundry room and I jumped up on the washing machine and I crawled out through a window into the backyard, and now I'm running through the backyard and there was this big chain link fence and I thought I've never climbed a fence that high before. And then I woke up at home. I'm not sure which story to tell, but I'm going to go with the Great Alaskan Day Night Race. I was about 20 I think, and my friend invited me to go visit his family in Anchorage for 2 weeks during the summer. We were staying at his cabin on the lake, and we left at about 2 AM in his friend's cherry red turbocharged Jetta to go on a joyride. It was sunny out due to it being Alaska in the summer, and his friend obviously felt like showing off, so he floored it on a straightaway, and just as we reached the top of a small hill which we couldn't see over, we passed a cop going 120 plus miles per hour. All we had the time to see was the cop flip on his lights before we lost him behind the hill, but we still had an extremely long stretch of straightaway, so he sped up as fast as he possibly could. Apparently he was in the military and of course didn't want to get kicked out, and just before we got to the bend we saw the cop come back over the hill racing to catch us. After we went around the bend, we came to a fork in the road and we went right. Then we had another choice to go straight, left or right, and we went left and drove up a dirt road, parked the car and waited. We waited about 30 minutes, just wondering when we were going to see a cop car roll up on us, but it never came. When we left, we were sure we were going to be seen, since it was bright and sunny out, 2 AM, and we were in a very distinguishable vehicle. But we lucked out and drove straight back to the cabin and proceeded to drink a bottle of absinthe in the hot tub. The end. Might be a bit delayed to this thread, but I have a good one that involves two friends. It was Christmas night. A large group of friends had this barn that we would all hang out in next to his house. It wasn't a typical farm barn, it was more like a giant shed that we converted into the ultimate hangout spot point anyways. We all meet up there Christmas night with our required Christmas money and decide to buy some weed. We had a buddy James who was getting pretty deep into the game and was selling weed and stuff like that. No one else in the group was that deep. We just liked smoking and playing music and whatnot. So we all give James our money to go get us some green and he says, "A gal animator, ride with me." I think about it for a second and reply, "Nah, but Kirk will go with you." Crick casually agreed to ride along. No one expected any trouble or issues. I just was feeling lazy or something and wanted to hang out instead of riding along. Really no big deal. Point, you also need to understand our friend Kirk. He was a tad of a bigger guy, really innocent looking, glasses, friendly demeanor, and also recently bought a new jacket from Men's Warehouse that we all dubbed the dad jacket because we said it made him look like a dad when we were all like 18 to 19 years old. It almost looked like a beige windbreaker. Anyways, Kirk was like, "Yeah, screw it, I'll ride along," and away they went. A while later we get a phone call, I forget from who exactly, and finally when Kirk returns we get the story. Point, it was relatively late at night. It was dark and James' car had super tinted windows. As they were getting off the interstate and driving towards the targeted neighborhood, a cop drove past them. Not long after, the cop turned around and flipped on his lights. Now they hadn't picked up the weed yet, but as I said, James was already getting deep into the game and had a large sum on money in the car, along with various paraphernalia like scales and stuff like that. Not sure if he had any personal marijuana or not, but regardless it was probably enough to get him into some trouble. So James decides to book it and try and outrun the cop. You also need to understand this from Kirk's perspective. Like, we weren't really bad kids. We didn't go around getting into trouble, so Kirk was understandably like, "Dude, what the fuck are you doing?" James pulls into the surrounding neighborhood. They can see the lights in the background behind them somewhere. James stops the car and yells to Kirk, "Run," and then bolts out the driver's side door and hops some fences. Kirk is sitting there completely stunned and shocked. He bolts from the passenger side of the car and runs up to a random house next to the car and is kinda hiding / sitting on their porch. Point, a moment later and cops are swarming around the abandoned car. Kirk has no idea what to do. He obviously can't stay at the house too long. I mean, what if they decide to come out? So Kirk, and I don't know how much he thought this through, walked down the driveway of the house and up to the abandoned car and the cops surrounding it and goes, "I swear to God," says, "Is there a problem here, officers?" They take a look at him and tell him to go back inside his house. He goes okay and walks away and starts walking down the street, turned a corner, booked it, and called a friend for a ride back to the hangout spot. I'm convinced that it was the dad jacket that helped saved him and his innocent demeanor. Had I rode along instead, not only would I probably had not done the same strategy, but even if I had, I have tattoos and shit like that, I don't think they would have overlooked me the same way. James ended up getting away as well and everything turned out okay, but what a crazy story. Not me but a wild friend. This is a friend who routinely did crazy stupid stuff with me in the car, which led me to believe every word of his story. So this takes place in Geneva, FL, which is total backwoods area. My friend drives a Jeep, but treats it like a fast and furious getaway vehicle. I don't know how he never rolled over, but anyway, one night as he's speeding he gets pulled over, and cop gives him a warning, tells him to go straight home. He doesn't and continues to drive around speeding, like 85 miles per hour in a 25 miles per hour road, and gets pulled over again, and gets a ticket. Was this enough to send him home? Nope. So again, speeding like a demon he zips by another cop and lights come on, but he realizes he has some distance and already a warning and ticket, so he floors it to outrun him. Now Geneva is a mixture of paved and dirt, and at one point he pulls a Tokyo drift U-turn at a dead end and the cop, not being as wild, did a safer turn, gaining him some distance. So he takes advantage and turns into another dirt road and floors again, but suddenly gets off road and into some bushes and turns off his car and gets out to runaway. He sees the cop car zip by and he decides to just stay in the woods to wait it out. Apparently the cop got wise to what happened and started to drive slowly by with his spotlight to find him. This was at 11 PM and they looked for him until 1 AM supposedly. He waited a lot longer in the woods, like until 3 AM, and then he walked onto the road to see if the coast was clear, and just to be sure he walked all the way down a few streets to look around the corners and no one was there, so he got his Jeep out of the bush and drove home. Oh man, I've got a few. A good one that stands out is me and a bunch of friends. We're out riding. It was me, my brother, my two good friends, my cousin and her boyfriend. We all went out riding, and my cousin and her boyfriend weren't all that great. We were on a pretty rough trail and decided we'd make our way to the road to give my cousin and boyfriend an easy ride home. So there's me, my brother and my two friends sitting on the side of Main Road waiting for my cousin and her boyfriend. After about 10 minutes I see them pull out onto the road. As I look back at them, I see a truck rolling up with a light bar. It hits me then that oh fuck, it's a game warden, time to dip. I yell to everyone to get going. My cousin and her boyfriend dip, and one of my buddies couldn't get his dirt bike to start. He's sitting there kicking this thing like his life depends on it at that point, and me brother hightail it as the game warden is right there. As me and him are taking off, the game warden sideswipes my brother with his truck. My brother jumps up, gets back on his bike, and we dip. We got about 100 yards down the road and look back and see the game warden sitting there yelling at my two friends. We decide fuck it, we'll hang out, maybe we can cause a distraction to help them. We sit there for a bit and hear the game warden yelling at my friends to stop trying to start their bikes, and my friends are yelling at him that he just hit someone. This goes back and forth for a bit while the whole time my bud is kicking his bike over. After about 5 minutes of this, boom, my buddy's bike starts and they take off. Game warden runs to his truck and gives chase. Now all four of us are hammering down this main road with no other roads or trails to dip into. As we're going down the road with the game warden in hot pursuit, a statty comes hailing us down the road and basically movie style brakes his car sideways in the road. Me and my brother look at each other and give a little nod and split to either side into the ditch around him and back out into the road. He turns and starts chasing us, and my buddies split down a different road with the game warden behind them. My buddies ended up going down some long driveway to a house that luckily had no one at it, and the game warden didn't notice me and my brother, however, had a statty hot on our tails. This went on for at least 10 minutes till we got to the nearest trail and lost him, or so we thought. Turns out this robber cop motherfucker decided to follow us into the trail. At this point we are like, what the fuck is this guy thinking? So we slow up and let him follow us all the while he's on his speaker yelling at us to stop. He eventually gets stuck and we stop, turn and laugh and took off. The best part is one of my other buddies, a tow truck driver, and had to get the cop unstuck. The cop was fuming and was screaming about us. He said it was so hard not to laugh cause he knew immediately it was us. We were young and stupid. It was the night before I moved to another town about 600 miles over. My best mate was going to drive me there and help me set up my house in the first week. We decided that we should have some last beers in our favorite bar, so we did. We only had a few, literally 3 or 4 each, 25 cl beers, but we knew he was on the edge of being allowed to drive, probably just over, but he was far from drunk. We drive home when we spot a roadblock in the distance. It takes us 2 seconds before we realize it's a roadblock where they check for drunk drivers. My buddy slams on the brakes and asks what do we do. I tell him to take his chances. If he gets a fine I'll pay my share, but I didn't think it'd be a high fine. He panics and says I'll fail the test. I'ma turn around. There was no option but to turn around or go straight ahead. In true action hero style he puts the car in reverse, does a 180, tire screeching. He must have felt so bad as in his beat up Opel, Vauxhall Corsa. He floors it, and we're for our first and last. So far, police chase. We are doing 1 to 60 miles per hour in about 2 minutes, while I'm looking back the roadblock. They must have heard. They can't have not heard us. Nothing. 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 One headlight comes our way. The police car has a busted headline. Fack. Police bike. I yell. Now I'm a bike guy and I know our cops use the BMW 1600 GT, which is fast, especially compared to my mate's lovely sheet bucket of accumulated rust on wheels, but I also know that this articled a little, so we have no chance outrunning it in any way. The bike is closing in fast, so I tell my mate to take the first left into an industrial zone. Suddenly a scene of a movie pops in my head. A car being chased by cops along a line of parked cars performs a handbrake turn, slides into a parking spot and the cops just fly by. Take the next right, find a parking spot, kill your engine and lights, and yell at him. Straight away I thought I should have said this in a cool mastermind kind of voice, instead of with the excitement of a young boy who just saw his first pair of tigs. But hey, I was in my first ever police chase. My mate throws his car around the right corner, and by a sign of God, the first parking spot if free. In one smooth motion he rounds the corner, kills the engine, even before being in the spot, kills the lights, and in criminally symmetric motion we recline our seats and act asleep. 2 seconds later the cop flies by, does a lap of the roundabout up ahead, flies by again, and disappears into nowhere. We sit there for a few minutes, imitating Hyannis with our immature laughter, and then take the longest detour ever to get home. We won. I hope this doesn't get too buried. It's a fond memory I have. Back in college around 2011, I was driving from Seattle, Washington to Pullman, Washington. Anyone who knows this drive also recognizes this drive is brutal. Albeit, I've done this drive well over 100 times throughout the years. This particular time, I had friends in the car that did not have a car out in Pullman and needed rides. About 5 miles outside of Ellensburg, Washington, they decide to moon and goat this random bus. I begrudgingly allowed it, even though I was nervous of repercussions. We flew by the bus laughing and continued down the highway when my buddy mentions that the big blue bus is chasing us. Looking down at my speedometer and noticing it said 90 miles per hour, I had to agree that the bus was indeed in hot pursuit. Keep in mind Ellensburg has a state patrol station. Naturally, I dart off the highway and start taking back roads with the bus still in pursuit. Eventually we lose the bus in town after jumping off the first exit. We are all a little shook from potentially having my plates read and the real possibility of being pulled over later in the drive. Here's where it gets funny. As we are heading back onto the highway we see the big blue bus on the side of the road with its hazards blinking. As we are driving by, all the people on the are yelling and pointing at us. In front of the bus is a state trooper, his patrol car, and the bus driver facing away from the road as we drove by. The bus driver was most likely giving a description of my car as we drove past them. They never even noticed that we drove by. Point it goes without saying, all us stayed in seats the rest of the ride back to school. That's the story of the big blue bus and how we used up the rest of our luck on that journey. At least a dozen times that I can think of. Here's a few. 1 17-year-old keg party in the middle of a field, which the cops were not invited to. Only one way in or out, and all of the kids were 17 to 18. We'd been there for about 45 minutes, and the bonfire was getting pretty massive, so naturally the sheriff plus deputies roll up with lights on. Most kids are busted, but my buddy and I are like, fuck this. We hop into his Honda Civic, and he starts driving lights off, full speed, through the field. However, this isn't a nice, smooth, Oklahoma wheat field. We end up in a small ravine, absolutely stuck. So we just shut it down and wait a couple of hours. Had to call a buddy to come tow us out. 2 16-yo, making gasoline bombs out at the dam at the local lake. Someone calls the sheriff. We see the lights coming up the road and know we have about 2 minutes. We take off running into the forest and find some good hid a-holes. Naturally we are all wearing camouflage, so we knew it would be a beach for them to find us. Instead the deputies just yell, "We know you're hiding. Come out and let's talk." One of my fellow idiots yells no. This actually made the deputies laugh. We had a standoff for about 30 minutes where no one did anything. Then they simply got in their cars and left. We didn't even try to leave our hiding spots for 3 hours. 3 13-yo, flipped off a police car that was passing by. He slams on his brakes, makes a U-turn, and we are running full speed. Since we know the neighborhood like the back of our hands, we cut across backyards and end up in a tree house with a good view of the street. Cop rolls around a few times, but gives up. 4 15-year-old, New Year's Eve, buddy and I are outside around midnight, setting off fireworks and burning some homemade napalm styrofoam dissolved in gasoline on the sidewalk. Down the street, we see cop headlights heading up and start stomping on the napalm to put it out. It just spreads fire on our boots and keeps burning. Cop lights flip on and we start running. Our boots are literally on fire while we are hightailing it away from a house, intending to circle back later. Cops seemed to have better things to do and didn't pursue us. 5 10 16-yo, skating on campus. 6 25-yo, rented a car and drove 13 hours straight from Wisconsin to Oklahoma, midwinter, and it had just started snowing. I was doing the speed limit in the middle of the night on a turnpike in OK. I was on the last hour of my trip and exhausted. Another car thought it'd be fun to match my speed and start dicking around driving in front of me. I just wanna get past the guy, so I gun it to 110, and he tries to match me, but fails. What didn't fail was that there was a highway patrol waiting. I see the lights about a mile or two back in my rear view mirror. A toll plaza is coming up, which I have to go through to get home, and that I have to stop at to pay the toll. The asshole driver keeps going on turnpike, and I stop at the toll plaza. I was thinking that by stopping and doing a law-abiding thing, that the cop would continue to chase the other guy. However, the highway patrolman pulls me over. "Grab your registration and come sit in my car." Damn, I'm screwed. I get out and he motions for me to sit in the front seat. Get in, close the door. It's cold outside and he's an older cop, so I'm guessing he didn't want any of this shit tonight. He looks at me for a minute, then says, "Know how fast you were going?" I say 95. It was a lie, but he said, "I clocked you at 90. Speed limit is 75. And it's snowing. I don't want to have to peel you off the highway." I nod silently. He asks for my license, registration, etc. At this time I had an Indiana driver's license, a rental car from Wisconsin, with plates from Florida. Figuring I was getting a massive ticket for admitting guilt, I asked him, "Didn't you see the other guy? Why didn't you get him?" He smiled and said, "A lion doesn't care what he eats, as long as he gets to eat," and he took my papers and license. He asks me where I'm from, and I mention the town, which is now only about 2 miles away. He asks me if I know the sheriff there. I do. "It's my cousin." He says he knows him well. We spent 15 minutes talking about all of the various minor things going on in town. Turns out he lives in my hometown and knew my grandfathers and knows my dad too. After all this, he hands my stuff back to me and said, "I'm giving you a warning." I'm guessing the paperwork this world generated exceeded his interest in giving me a ticket, and I think the local boy connection might have helped too. I have numerous other stories about running from the cops. The vast majority was before I was 18, because after that, I knew getting arrested would impact my school/future career. I went to college in Plattsburgh, New York. We were at a bar called Peabody's for my roommate's 21st. Props if ya know it. I misplaced my proper fake from my brother, which was great. So I was using my roommate's brother's his old fake. The bouncer took it, was trying hard to determine if it was fake. It wasn't, it just didn't belong to me. A cop car happens to drive down the alley at this time, so the bouncer flags them down. Two officers get out. Him thinking him so faked. The bouncer hands one officer the who looks at it for about 20 seconds and then says, "You're lucky. I don't feel like arresting you for this, it's not yours." But I'm gonna I snagged at it right out of the cop's hand and started booking down the alley. There was no way I was losing my roommate's brother's so he could get in trouble at a later date. I like to think that the cops didn't even run after me or get in their car to search for me. I like to think they were too embarrassed by what had just happened. Bonus story for extra points. Also in Plattsburgh a semester later, I was walking with a young lady to her dorm from a house party. We stopped in a school playground to have sex. I was sitting on a plastic slide getting a blowjob when a squad car shines a spotlight on us. I quickly pull up my pants and zip up. She puts her shirt back on. The cop comes toward us. He's probably 30 years old and low, and behold he says, "I'm using a fake name out of respect. Samantha, is that you?" I think right away, you gotta be kidding, this girl has banged a cop hoss at least 10 years older than her. But it turned out he was her cousin. She tells him I'm her new boyfriend, which I wasn't, but she was trying to save my ass from jail. So instead of getting charged as a pedophile for indecency at a playground, he drives us back to her apartment. When we get back to her place, he pulls me to the side and gives me the whole "I could have ruined your life tonight, kid, and if you break her heart I'll kill you" speech. We never officially dated, but we remained very close and romantic for the next 2 years. But we never faked in public again. Also, I had to meet her parents and claim we were dating due to this whole scenario. Typical high school party, out in the woods. This party had been so hyped up, I can't believe we didn't know it would get busted. Anyway, we are all down by a river when my friend, who had just torn his ACL in a football game, decides he wants to leave. We start heading back to the cul-de-sac, where probably 60 plus cars line the roads. At one point, I had to give him a piggyback to cross a small part of the river, which I fell into, so I was soaked. There are people everywhere. Seriously, it felt like the entire school was in these woods. We're on a trail, walking with a small group of people, when a flashlight beam hits me in the chest. Freeze. Nobody move. On instinct, I turn around, so they couldn't see my face, grab my friend by the sweatshirt, take off running, and jump over some bushes 10 to 20 yards away. We hide out for a few minutes, while the cops round up the people who panicked and didn't run. We then realize that there are about 15 to 20 cops in the area. They get far enough away that we start bushwhacking our way deeper into the woods, but every 20 feet, a flashlight would shine through the trees, the cop would yell, and we'd take off running. It worked, because there were so many other kids running, that it was just a game of whoever was closest to the cop or the slowest. We ended up playing this game of cop hide and seek for about 2 hours, until we decided to just kinda bury ourselves in branches and leaves, and stay put. Then, we heard the dogs, and the ATVs. They were pulling out all the stops, to get every one of us. At one point, a cop stepped right over my back, as I lay under a bush. Then, we heard the tow truck. They were towing everyone's cars. We were out there so long, that I fell asleep for almost an hour. It was 3 of us. One kid was a straggler that just followed us through the woods. He decided it was time to go, so he got up, and, boom, flashlight to the face, gets taken down by a cop that was camped out near us. We stayed there until about 4 AM, when we finally decided it was safe. We slowly got up, took about 4 steps, and here, freeze, and see fragments of a flashlight beam. I told my friend to not move or say anything because I could tell the cop only heard us but couldn't see us through the trees. We stood like mannequins for what seemed like an eternity. He kept saying, "Come out or I'll call the dog over." But we stayed motionless. It seemed like my friend, who was exhausted and in pain, was about to give up when some girl nearby yells, okay, I'm coming." She walks to the cop, gets handcuffed, and they walk off. Then, we just wait and wait until finally there are no more sounds of police. No tow truck sounds. No ATVs. We walk through the woods as the sun is coming up, expecting to get back to no car. This is before everyone had cell phones too. We reach the road and we see one remaining car, my friend's Jeep. We get in and drive off in disbelief. I guess the way everyone was parked made them come for his car last. As we are driving down the road, we see a tow truck going towards where we came from, presumably to get his car. In the end, the bust made the newspaper. They brought a school bus out because they arrested so many kids. They called it the bust bus, and it had to make multiple trips. Hundreds of high school kids got arrested. The next day at school was basically a contest of who had the craziest story. Some kids got arrested immediately. Some swam across the river and walked miles home. In the end, it really was incredible that we didn't get caught, especially with an injured friend. We both told our parents, who were pissed, but also both actually just really happy we didn't get arrested. That was a fun night. One time I driving on the highway and some guy was being a complete dickbag, swerving through lanes, riding us, then he got up to me. He rode miles like crazy, so I was slowing down. He tried to get ahead of me, so I sped up to block him in, and he rolled his window down and was yelling through my girlfriend's window on the passenger side. He ended up getting back behind us, so my girlfriend threw a cup of soda out the window at his car. At this point we were both going pretty fast, but afterwards I just let him go because I was bored of the situation. Not, but 3 minutes later there was a cop on the inner shoulder of the highway and he flagged me down specifically. He was standing on the side outside of his cruiser. I know he expected me to pull over because he must have been waiting for me, I assume. Instead of pulling over I kept going, sped up and got off the highway. Took a different route to where I was going. I no longer drive or act like that, nor do condone doing that. It's stupid. I have physically ran from cops before, trespassing stuff as a little kid. Nothing major really, no fun story there. Although one time two friends and I had climbed onto the roof of my elementary school and were walking around. Then we decided to get down. I think we had seen a cop car. Me and one friend got down inside an alcove to an entrance and we noticed one cop car drive down the alley. We knew it was time to go. Then we saw another one, so we both ducked behind bushes. Our other friend was still on the roof when we heard a third vehicle stop and someone call out to us to put our hands up. We stayed behind the bushes for a minute. They had no idea we were there, but we stood up and raised our hands. We got escorted to the police station and were told in the cruiser had we ran they would have let the dogs out, which they did have. The reports were for 4 people trying to break in. Half an hour before we were there. We were just in the wrong place at the wrong time it seemed. Also had the one friend said he was the only one up there and we hadn't gone up there we could have avoided a lot of stuff, but that kid was too self-absorbed to think about that, whereas me and my other friend would have in an instant. Don't run from the cops. It's not worth it. I was home in Dallas during summer in college. Went to meet up with some chick in Plano that I met off Hot or Not at like midnight. Picked up a 6-pack of Rolling Rock on the way, fake ID. Got there and she was a beast. She drank 2 of the beers, I had none, and started pawing at me. I started laughing at her and left. So I'm driving 90 miles per hour, speed limit is 60 or 65, on Highway 75 through Plano, thinking about what a waste of time this all was, when I blow by a cop sitting on the side of the road. He hits his lights, and I look over at the now 4-pack of beer on my front seat. This is not good for 20-year-old me. I don't remember making the conscious decision, but I floored it, and the old Volvo S60R got up to 150 miles per hour in short order. Fortunately there are sort of rolling hills on that part of 75, so he kept disappearing from sight as he fell further and further behind. During one of the valleys I jammed the brakes and took an exit, took a few turns, parked on the street in some neighborhood, and turned the car off. My adrenaline was through the roof. So I called some of my fraternity brothers with a "you won't believe what I just did" story. While I sat there I had another fraternity brother that was super used to just blowing cops off on his hey abuser. Then he tried it on the George W. Bush tollway in North Dallas in his Ford Lightning pickup truck. And got stuck in traffic at the toll booth and arrested at gunpoint for felony evasion of state trooper. Fortunately he got it bargained down to a Class B misdemeanor, failure to yield to an emergency vehicle. But even that threw a monkey wrench into his career. He started an online firearms business that's grown into a behemoth until he got it expunged from his record. I have two. Sorry for formatting. I'm on mobile. Point first was, when I was young and dumb, I leave the bar drunk and drive the wrong way to a one-way alley. I already said dumb. I'm sitting at the intersection with my left turn signal on to turn onto the main street and a cop drives by me and clearly sees me. I see him put his lights on and speed up. He has to go down about a block to turn around. I put it in reverse, back down the alley, and then head down another alley in the same direction the cop was originally heading. Take a bunch of other alleys and eventually make it home safely. Point second is when older and wiser, arguably, I don't always get my street bike inspected. In my state it is an annual requirement and each year you get a different color sticker when you pass your inspection. Anyway, I know my inspection is out and I'm pulling up behind a cop sitting at a two-way stop sign and is going straight. My inspection sticker is on my front fork, which will be visible in his side mirror. I put my left signal on and pull in behind him close enough that he can't see my sticker. The problem is that I am so close to his bumper that he suspects something is up. The way the intersection is configured, he can't just turn his lights on and pull me over when I'm behind him. So he drives through the intersection and has to turn around in order to get me. I move forward and make my left and can see him turning around and within a 1/4 mile catches up to me. Luckily he never turned his lights on. Right around where he caught up to me is where his jurisdictional boundary line was. I made the next left onto my street and then the third house is mine. Pulled into my driveway and right into my garage. Got off my bike and closed the garage door. As it was closing I saw the cop turning around in my neighbor's driveway. Stupid and scared. Point flashback to 16-year-old me driving back from a friend's house with a small amount of weed in the car. I should also add that I had been drinking, albeit I was not drunk. Point anyway, I'm on the final road leading up to my neighborhood and pass a cop traveling in the opposite direction. Shortly after passing, he flips on his lights and starts to turn around. I immediately panicked. I didn't know much about the law at the time and was just genuinely scared. I figured getting caught with weed would ruin my entire life or something. At this point, the cop is still pretty far behind me as he is just accelerating from making like a 3-point turn in the middle of a road. I figured if I could make it to my house, even if he caught me, I could plead ignorance, like I didn't see him or something. So I accelerated hard and made a quick dive into my neighborhood. I flew past 4 blocks headed towards my street while looking in the rearview mirror. Now here is where it's important for me to mention that I had access to a garage. My mother raised me herself and was frequently out of town on business. So I was able to keep my car in the garage most of the time. Point turned onto my street while spam clicking the garage door opener, pulled in, shut it before I even turned the car off, went into the kitchen and peered through the windows waiting to see if a cop car ever drove by. It never came. Point the whole thing was so stupid. Yay, I got away. But I would have gotten in way more trouble if I got caught. This happened at a community college a few years ago. There was about 30-ish of us that got together to play campus-wide hide and seek. The campus itself sat on probably 10 to 20 acres of ground, had about a dozen buildings, 3 sets of dorms, a baseball field and a small park. Point now we had all agreed that the whole campus was fair game, so long as it wasn't inside the building, to hide on and to wear a grey or black shirt and these dark blue, almost purple vests that someone had acquired, don't know where from, but he had enough for everyone. The seekers wore bright red shirts. Now we had 5 people, all truck runners who volunteered to seek. To get caught they had to tag you. You're safe so long as they don't tag you. They gave up all a 10 minutes head start and went and hung out in a dorm room while they wait. Welp, about half an hour into the game cops showed up. Small 2-man squadron first, and they flagged down the seers whom are wearing these red shirts and walking around with flashlights. They explained. The cops decided to hop in and play. They called in 4 more cops who aren't doing anything important and explained the situation. So that 30 college kids ended up running from the cops in a single night without breaking any laws. All but 5 of us got caught. Us 5 were hiding on top of a 4-story building we park up. My 2 brothers, 2 girls I was friends with, and myself decided we were bored walking around town for the 100th time that summer. This was before we drank much, so we would meet up and go play mini golf in town or sneak onto the beach at night. My one brother and I had taken a couple girls up to the roof of this hotel to try and hook up with them the week before, so we thought, let's go up there because it's pretty cool seeing the town and ocean from that high up at night. We struck out the week before, by the way, and the girls this night were family friends, just to clear that up. So we walk in the hotel like it's nothing and get in the elevators to the top floor. Find the stairs, move the chain and open the door. There wasn't any security measures whatsoever unless you count a chain across the steps. So we go out, sit for a while joking around until we got bored of that too and decided to leave. But before we left, some of us wanted a picture of the lights of town. So we climb to a little peak and my brother takes a picture with his flash on like an idiot. Not 5 seconds after the flash, we see a flashlight on the boardwalk point at us. I said, fuck, we got to go now and start to leave. One girl panicked and just sat down. We told her to get up and all headed quickly for the door. We ran inside and decided to split up. My brother, the youngest girl, and myself went to the stairs on the back of the building. We were heading across the balcony and saw the manger and a cop with his lights on point at us. We tried to stay calm and just pretended we were staying there and walked back inside. We started running down the stairs, heard the door open down below, and heard someone say, "I'll see if they're up here." We turned around and headed to the elevators. The door opened and we saw the other girl and my other brother. The girl that was with us was freaking out, so we let her go with the other girl and my one brother. Myself and my other brother decided we'd run through the hallway to the staircase on the other side and get out and make a break for it. Surprisingly, there weren't any cops on that side and we just snuck around the back by the dumpsters and calmly walked down the street while cops were passing us with the lights on. It's a small and mellow beach town. I have no doubt they were looking for us. My brother with the girls said he had a plan and not to worry about him and the girls. So my brother and I calmly walked to the town center and sit on a bench. We called them and there wasn't an answer. We though fuck, they got caught. We are going to have to deal with these girls' parents and our parents when they find out. My brother that we left called and said they were just sitting in the hotel on the couches on one of the floors near the elevator. I called him a faking more and the cops were all over and to get out. Turns out his plan was hiding in plain sight. At the time I thought it was stupid, but eventually they got up and walked out the front of the hotel while one girl pretended to be on the phone saying they just left the room where they should meet for dinner. We met up and got into my brother's car and headed to the girl's house. We sat on the porch in complete disbelief that we got away and that nobody even stopped us to ask if we'd seen anything. Bit of a long one here. Me and my 2 friends were just finishing a long day of sailing when we notices that the building site for a 95% completed school was unguarded. We decided to check it out and saw that there was enough space under the gate to crawl under. We managed to squeeze through with no problem, but my friend clips his ankle bone and is limping. We start to walk past the car park behind a fence next to the school. Just as we think we are safe, we see a big black SUV start to move with the word security on the door. We faking bolt along the road next to the school to a gate at the other end of the site. Now it's important to know there is another road perpendicular to this road that is also patrolled. We see point through a fence a white car drive up, so we lie low and pretend to be rocks. Yes, I know it's retarded. We then see the black car behind us So we bolt again and try to climb over this fence to the perpendicular road. With the weight of all three of us, the fence breaks and falls and we see a taller fence we know we can't climb. We ditch that idea and run to the end of the site towards the second gate I mentioned. We look behind us and see a fat sweaty man get out of the black sub with the biggest German shepherd I have ever seen. It starts barking and he lets go of the lead. I bolt under the gate, my friend does as well, but our third friend has to go over. We just barely get out. We then run across the road to the supermarket and go for a lap around it plus get chocolate milk. Our second friend is now in a lot of pain due to the ankle injury, but he is not out of the woods yet. We go to pay, and when we leave the shop, two Garda Irish police walk in looking for us. We then run as soon as we get out and run down a road parallel to the perpendicular road with the white car. This road, however, is on the other side of a river, perpendicular road with white sub on other. We get to the end, but it's a dead end and we ain't turning back. This river is tidal, however, so we can jump down to rocks below us. Our friend, however, can't as it's a 3.5 meters drop. We jump down and so does friend 2, but is barely walking. We suddenly hear a voice from a security guard on the other side of the river. We shit ourselves, but he only makes a joke about wanting to be able to swim as we are walking in the river. We agree, so he goes away and continue on under a bridge to a beach where this river meets the sea. Here we each bolt and cycle home. I was riding my motorcycle alongside a buddy on his own motorcycle. We were cruising down the highway with me in the leader position when I had decided to split to cars. I live in the Midwest, where no one is used to lane splitting. It's illegal and you don't want to be the second guy through the split. So this meant leaving my buddy behind for what is normally only a few moments, as he always just catches up. Well, I had already committed to splitting these two cars and was 1/4 of the way between them when I noticed the light bar in the back window of an unmarked car. It wasn't a normal cop car either. It was something else. Something less fast, lol. I quickly calculated two options. I'm only 1/4 of the way through, I can back out now and guarantee a pullover from what the fuck ever car this is. I can keep going into the worst upcoming road conditions to be in a high speed chase with. I'm with my buddy and we were both headed to my house. He already knew the way and knows the garage code. I decided fake it. I'm gassing the semi-FO. I guarantee I'm faster than what the fuck ever car this is. Though I know I'm not faster than Motorola, and luckily home base isn't that far away. I decided to split. I tucked behind the windshield, gassed it and went. Looked back in my mirror and saw him light up his cherries. So I tucked more and throttled more. Now let me lay out the scene of what's to come. This was a terrible location to be throttling down. I'm on a 4-lane highway, 2 lanes in each direction with a median and 2 360-degree exits merging onto my side of the highway. So everyone getting onto the highway in the direction that I'm now doing 120 miles per hour plus is merging at about 35 miles per hour and sometimes jerking across both lanes. I have to make decisions about 8 seconds sooner than normal. After the merging traffic, the highway opens up a bit, but is still 2 lanes and 1 large upward hill to stoplights and a known spot where cops like to sit and radar those rolling into the stoplights too fast. Sure enough, there's one sitting in that spot as I come up over the hill. He's sitting there with his driver door wide open and is clearly not bothered by the upcoming speeding motorcycle that I expected to be coming over the Motorollas. Okay, I thought. Traffic is stopped about 8 cars deep in both lanes at the stoplight ahead. I can't wait here. I whiz between the parked cars, cut a hard right in the middle of the intersection into an unknown residential area like a retard. My brain is running so fast, it connected to the Google Maps API faster than the speed of light, downloaded the data, and was quickly doing all kinds of analysis on routes back to the safe house. Luckily that residential area eventually lets out on a road right by my house and now I knew exactly where I was. I whip around the area, got to my street, go to my house, and noticed my buddy. My buddy was already in my garage, with the door open, waiting. I tore as into that garage so fast, locked up the front brakes hard enough to pop up the rear end, and yelled, "Shut the faking garage, shut it right now." He drops his phone on the garage floor, fumbles off his bike and shuts the door. I shut off the bike and sit there watching the garage door in my rear view shut behind me, breathing heavily. I waited until the door completely shut before I jumped off my bike and screamed, "That's how you ride. That's how you get away. Oh man, that's how you do it." In all honesty, the first cop car didn't have a chance unless he used his Motorola, which he clearly didn't when I approached Challenger #2 over the hill. So, I could have been panic driving through town all by myself as far as I know. I lost the first Challenger a long time ago. Shrugged, good enough for me to mark it off my bucket list and never do it again, though. A friend of mine was out riding his sport bike on a rural secondary highway one night, about 2 a.m., drunker than he should have been. He decides to see how fast it would go. He was basically the only person on the road. At 220 kilometers per hour, he sees a pair of headlights in the distance, traveling towards him. Once the lights are upon him, he notices the word police in reflective lettering between them. Uh-oh. His options are shut the throttle, take the DUI and stunting charges, or keep the hammer down and run. He chooses run. There's a tertiary highway that runs parallel to the secondary highway. This tertiary highway will take him back to the city he came from. My friend takes the next road that connects the two highways, turning left onto the connecting road, while the cop is about 500 meters back, pulling a U-turn with sirens and lights ablaze. Friend flies down the connecting road, Isle of Man style, hoping to put enough distance between him and the cop that the cop loses interest or my friend's trail. It works. When my friend turns onto the tertiary highway to go back to the city he came from, there's no sign of the cop. He rides the tertiary highway at a brisk pace, hoping to get home quickly and put this all behind him. 10 minutes of riding on this highway brings him to a bridge. That is the last obstacle between him and his home city. He crosses the bridge triumphantly and relieved, only to be greeted by two squad cars sitting in a parking lot just off of the road on the city side of the bridge. They knew he was coming. They hit their lights and pursue our motorcyclist. He panics and continues running, this time through the city instead of wide open rural roads. Every time he does something particularly stupid, like running a red with no regard for cross traffic, or riding the wrong way down a road, the cops break off contact. Each time they pick up the pursuit again with a different set of squad cars about a block away. His animal brain is taking him home, where I presume he will hide under his bed and shout home free, as the SWAT team breaks down his front door. As the chase continues, now about 30 minutes from first police sighting till now, the police are becoming more emboldened. One female officer runs him off the road by turning into his lane head on, forcing him to ride on the sidewalk at about 3 times the speed limit. He passes by his house, still being fully pursued. Realizing that stopping would be futile, he continues running until he gets a small break from one group of squad cars. He immediately pulls off onto a residential side road, unseen, and hides the bike between two parallel parked cars while cruisers fly past on the main road. He considers walking the 2 or 3 kilometers home, but is dissuaded when another group of passing cruisers cause him to jump behind some bushes. There's no way he'll make the walk uncontested on major streets, and there's no way to make the trip home on foot by residential streets. The residential roads just don't connect the neighborhoods. My friend spends the rest of the night sleeping in the tree well under a large pine tree in front of a small apartment building. He wakes in the morning, makes the 2 or 3 kilometer walk home, scared out of his mind that a squad car is going to pass by and notice him. He arrives at his home street, carefully rounding the corner, hyper aware and fully expecting his house to be a taped off crime scene. Nothing. No squad car in front of the house. No police business card in the mailbox saying, "Get your ass to the station. We know what you did." Nothing. He gets into his house, drinks most of a bottle of vodka left over from last night, and passes out. Later that day he discreetly retrieves the motorcycle and hides it in his backyard. Nothing ever comes of it. He has future interactions with the police, and they make no mention of it. How can this be? They certainly saw his license plate. Why chase a guy for 30 minutes and never follow up about it? Not even to question the legal owner of the motorcycle. I do not know, but our friend took it as a message to clean up, respect the road, and not ride drunk anymore. I have done it twice. I lived in a small town in Maine. Everyone knew everyone. I was probably 2 years into having my license, and I was a jerk, and hung out with troublemaking jerks. There were no town cops, just state police, 2 of them, that patrolled the area. They got to know us very well. One night a friend left a party at my house. I lived on the top of a small mountain and there was an old logging trail that ran by my house, that eventually turned into a real road, that brought you to the next town. He was drunk, and ran his car off the road into trees, and it got hung up in the trees. Next morning he calls me to tell me what happened, so 2 of my other friends, and I got to get him, and go to the car. As we approach the area where he crashed we cannot see the car, because of a hill in the road. Just as we crest the top of the hill there is a cop parked with the lights on writing something up about the accident. He looks at us, we look at him, and say oh shit. I'm driving my car, and I hit the gas. The cop has to get his car turned around, and that gives us a few extra seconds. Since I did not want to take my car down the logging trail that my friend used, we went around the normal way and we were now running from the cop and heading towards the trail with no options. The road is dirt and lots of small hills. The cop is gaining slightly, but I'm keeping a decent distance. Right before the road ends and turns into the trail we go down a long hill. I hit the gas and put some distance between us, and at this point the cop has to get over the hill so he can't see us. I realize this and turn into a small area the loggers keep their equipment in. I park behind so equipment. We all jump out and start throwing branched on the car for cover. We see the cop stopped at the top of the hill. He stays a few seconds and turns around and leaves. This same cop pulled me over a couple weeks later, never mentioned the incident. A year later he got me on a DUI point, second time was in the same town. I had a beat up Ford Limited that was very recognizable, and I was going home late at night when a state cruiser passed me going the other way. I did not have a license at that time and panicked. I hit the gas hard and took off, just like before he had to get his car turned around to chase me. I was going extremely fast, and I knew the area. When I got to a turn in the road, where I knew he would lose sight of me, I shut my lights off, and pulled into someone's yard and drone through their backyard, so I could use the brakes without the brake lights being seen from the road. Couple seconds later the cop flew by the house. I went the other way, and never saw him again. Bunch of us teens in South with cases of beer headed out to a party at a friend's hunting camp. This was in the 90s, so had handwritten directions. We're a ways out on a winding country road, and doesn't take a gumshoe to know where a vehicle full of teenagers is headed out there. Lots of forest with the occasional dirt road point. State police ride by. It looks like they're going to keep driving on at first, but I see them do a U-turn and flip on their lights just as we round a corner. I stupidly tell our friend to speed up, figuring we've still got a bit of a lead and we're out of view. I tell him to turn into the next trail and shut off his lights. We can see the red bubble reflecting off the trees a ways behind us as we do. Still out of their line of sight point, he creeps his sub slowly up the trail to get deeper in the woods. It's a trail probably used more for snowmobiles and ATVs. We see the cops pass by, not seeing us, and decide to wait a while to make sure they don't double back and catch us. About 15 meters pass as we debate starting to drink the beer and having our own party where we sit, just when headlights break the ridge in front of us from deeper in the woods. Well, we are faked. The cops must have known the trails. The panic subsides as we recognize it's a different vehicle. It's an old beat up pickup truck. The driver sees us and pokes his head out the window and asks us what the hell we are doing. We couldn't really see him due to the headlights, but the voice was familiar. To our absolute surprise, it's the host of the party. He was out for a joyride on the back trails around the hunting camp, and he led the way to our destination point TLDR, driving out to a party. Cops coming to pull us over on country road, dodge into random trail in woods, hide there. Vehicle shows up from deeper in woods. Turns out to be host of party out for joyride on camp trails. I don't know if it counts, considering that they did catch me, but why not tell my tale? This happened a while ago, so I can't remember exactly by the way, on mobile, and can't figure out a good TLDR point. I had just got pulled over a few days prior, because of no front license plate. I was given a few tickets, because of expired license, expired insurance, etc. but they told me to just drive home because they didn't want to wait on a tow truck, and I was compliant. Little piece of info, there were about 4 squad cars that night because it was training night or something like that point, so after they let me go, I went home and didn't drive for a few days. About 4 days after that incident, I got a call from my job wanting to discuss a promotion and said they wanted to talk to me at the store. So I stupidly decided to drive my truck up to work. It's only about 4 miles away in a city. I get up there and we talk for a little bit and then I leave to go back home. When I left the store, the only way to go back home is to turn right and make a legal U-turn to make a right turn at the intersection. Well, as soon as I turn out of the parking lot, I see a cop car right in front of me going the opposite direction than I needed to go. So instead of doing the U-turn, I decided to go through a neighborhood to try not to see him point. I have a 5-speed Dodge Ram with no power, but I'm pushing my engine just speeding through the neighborhood just trying to get out of there. I don't see him, but just for good measure, I'm still going as fast as I can on these city streets trying to make it home okay. Well, when I get to the second to last turn for me, I see him point no lights or anything, but he's catching up to me, and I'm already going 70ish in a 40. Bad idea by the way. But I managed to make the light on a yellow, so I keep pushing to make it. A few moments later, I see him turn on his lights to make it through the red light and then turn them back off. I'm a little confused by that, but I'm not going to slow down. I finally manage to get to my apartment, and right when I'm turning in, I see his lights go on a second time. This time he doesn't turn them off. I'm lucky that my parking space is 6 spaces from the entrance of the apartments, so I park and turn off the truck and lights. Not even 10 seconds later, he goes flying past me with lights and sirens on. I'm freaking out at this moment, so after I can't see him I run inside and tell my roommates that I just ran. They freak out and hide green goodies just in case he finds me. We see him leave the complex with lights still on, so we think we're okay. We're on point. I get a call from my boss about 15 minutes later telling me that cops were up there and got my address and are coming, and that I need to prepare for the worst. So we've already picked up everything that we have, so we're okay. But sure enough, 5 minutes later, we have the classic cop flashlight knock. We knew, but answered anyway. Turns out it was the same cops who pulled me over a few days before. They start telling me that they will arrest me for evading the cops and get a warrant or whatever. I can't afford to get in any kind of trouble, so I follow whatever they say. I'm telling them that I wasn't running, and I was crying to convince them. I'm a guy with a beard by the way, not pretty to see balding. So they say they are going to search my room because they smell marijuana, which they didn't, because my roommates were burning sage all day anyway. I'll let them search my room, knowing there's nothing there. But there's one problem. My roommate is a stripper and her costumes were in my closet. She doesn't have enough space in hers for everything, so she used mine. So I'm over here, crying, and I see the cops just exchange looks when they see these costumes. Of course, the first one they pull out is a fox-style costume, then a nurse, school teacher, and the cherry on top, they find my HOTDOG costume from Halloween. They must have thought that I'm some weird cross-dresser or something, because they just told me to never run again, fix my truck, and that was that. I saw him once again a few months later, and said, "Hey, aren't you the hot dog stripper?" We had a laugh about it, and I haven't seen him since. Moral of the story: if you have a stripper roommate, don't let them store their outfits in your closet if you ever try to break the law. So me and 3 friends decided to go explore an abandoned hotel at night. One of my friends had been there before and said all the furniture and TVs and sheet were still in there. So he was like, let's go smash TVs with crowbars cause the place is deserted and scheduled for demolition. So we get some cheap Azwama champagne, a crowbar, and a case of beer and drive over. So we hop the exterior construction fence and we walk up to the building, and my friend picks up a ladder off the ground and leans it against the building so we can climb in through the 2nd story balcony. So we get in there, and as we get in my friend starts making all these comments about how things were different than the last time he was there. Like, oh, that window wasn't broken, or that thing is moved, and we were like, okay, whatever. Then he notices the door is splintered around the knob like somebody kicked it in. We shake it off and ignore it and start setting up to explore. It's pitch black cause it's like 10 PM and there's no electricity. So we open the door and look down the hall with our flashlights and it's scary as shit. There's debris everywhere and it's plain creepy. And that's when we hear a bucket or something drop somewhere down the hallway. We immediately retreat back into the room and shut the door. We're all freaking out at this point, so we hide the booze behind the couch. One friend gets in the bathroom by the door with the crowbar and the other one stands directly by the door. Me and my best friend are farther back in the room. So after like a minute we hear footsteps in the hallway and we start to see a light under the door. It moves past, and then I swear to God like out of movie my friend takes one step back from the door and loudly crunches a piece of glass. That's when the light starts coming back to the door, so at this point I'm starting to back away toward the balcony, and I'm thinking okay it's either a homeless dude or cops, and if it's a cop, I'm jumping off this balcony. So the light gets right to the door and my friend peeks through the crack and looks back holding up his hand in the shape of a gun. That's when the door is kicked in, and 2 police officers, guns drawn, come flying into the room, and I vault off the balcony into the parking lot, and sprint like all hell towards the nearest building, which ended up being an Applebee's. Then later, after frantically trying to get in touch with my other friends to help, I get a call from my friend saying everything was cool and to come back. I was suspicious at first, but he swore everything was cool. So I went back, and they said all they got was a stern talking to. So we grabbed the booze, went back to my friend's apartment, and got trashed to celebrate not being shot by cops, or cut up, and murdered by gang members that had apparently been cooking drugs on the top floor of the hotel. TLDR, went into an abandoned hotel, almost got busted by cops, jumped off a balcony, hid in an Applebee's bathroom, got drunk. There was a teacher in high school who had a son who went to our high school. The teacher was an asshole and one day, he decides to take a vacation. Now, the kid decides to throw a party at the teacher's house, so everyone collectively and separately decides to go and destroy the place. I walk in, and I see just about everyone I had ever met, and they were all drinking like it was the end of the world. We were all down in the basement and this one kid decided to try and jump the pool table, failed, and broke the damn thing in half. Another kid found out which room was the teacher's, and went in to take a sheet on his computer. But back to the main event. So I'm in the basement and somebody says something police. I was about to black out, I don't know what he said, and so I yelled "Fuck DA police" and everyone else joined in. The reason someone had said something about the police was because the police had arrived. A Chicago police officer walked down the basement stairs and looked out over a sea of drunk toddlers yelling "Fuck the police" in his face. And he was almost impressed. He then leaned into his walkie-talkies and said "Get the paddy wagon." At that moment, my best friend who now has a child grabbed a 40, smashed it on the ground and yelled "Scatter." And we all ran in different directions. I ran into the laundry room and jumped onto the washing machine and crawled out a small basement window, and I was running through the backyard and there was this big chain link fence, and I thought I've never climbed a fence that high before, and then I woke up at home. Sold some weed back in my early high school days. A couple of friends hit me up on the other side of town for some weed, so I went and hung out, sold them some, and smoked a few bowls with them. It was almost dark. We were hanging out at a park near one of the girls' houses. My brother was on his way to pick me up to drive me to a party we were all going to later that night when I see some car lights roll onto the grass at the edge of the park. So I run around the trees and out to him, jokingly, holding the pipe and the lighter in both hands, when I realize that's not my brother's car, but rather SS police. I froze for a secretary, turned around and started running as fast as I could, threw the pipe down, screaming, "Cops, run, cops." As I ran into the alleyways between a few houses I could hear one of the cops yelling, "Stop, police." All my friends scattered. I spent what felt like an eternity hiding in alleyways and running across roads and into people's backyards. It was probably only 10 minutes. My brother calls me and tells me he drove by the park and there's 2 cop cars there and police with flashlights walking around. He met me at a school down the road from the park and I hopped in his car, scared shitless. I had at least a half-o of weed and a 26er of rum for the party in my backpack, plus a scale and baggers with some cash. Later on at the party we went to the cops came and told everyone there was a noise complaint and if they had to come back, they would start checking IDs and charging people. Dodged 2 bullets that night. This was my first time running from the police when I was young and dumb. Was not the last. Okay, so back in my motorcycle days I was coming home late one evening and I was on a temporary permit and those expire at midnight. I'm approaching the highway with about 20 minutes till midnight and about 20 minutes of travel to get home. Lo and behold, the on-ramp directly in front of me is closed due to construction and I have to detour 5 to 10 minutes to get to the next on-ramp. And this 5 to 10 minutes only puts me 1 minute up the highway, so time is now definitely an issue. So I start to push the speed up to make up for lost time and everything is going great until I reach the tunnel. Now I'm not sure how many of you ride or drive vehicles with nice sounding exhaust, but standard operating procedure, at least for me, is to drop down 1 to 2 gears and wind out the engine to get that sweet exhaust sound echoing through the tunnel. At the time I owned a CBR 929RR, so dropping 2 gears and winding the bike out to redline most definitely put me into the excessive speed category, 40 km/h, over the limit, 100 km/h. Anyways, as I'm coasting through the last half of the tunnel and passing one car in the slow lane, I make note of a unmarked SUV with distinctive features sitting on the shoulder near the end of the tunnel and my heart drops because I know exactly what the fuck that is. As I'm coasting past, I'm saying in my head, don't turn on the lights, don't turn on the lights, don't turn on the lights, / well, he turned on the lights. All of a sudden I turned into a math wizard because in the space of 1/10 of a second I calculated that this stop is going to cost me $2,000 to $3,000, excessive speeding ticket, towing and impound fees, driver's risk premium points on my license. And because it is right about pumpkin time driving without valid insurance, needless to say I ain't having that. So I pulled in the clutch and dropped the transmission down another gear and dropped the faking hammer. It is approximate 4 kms, thank you Google Maps, from the end of the tunnel to my place, and with a running start, and him starting from a dead stop, I figured I've got this, as I can be off the highway in under 2 minutes, and home in under 5, so the chances of him getting back up in place in time is slim point. So yeah, I went for it. Blast through what little traffic is out at that time of night, hit my exit, turn back across the highway, and look back long enough to see something hitting the off-ramp in what I have calculated later to be 5 seconds behind me. Hard right at the bottom of the hill and drop the hammer up the next hill hard, blow through the next light half a block up, and ripping it hard for 3 more blocks until I make the left before the quick right into my alley. There was construction and gravel and dirt all over the road when I made the left, so it took everything I had to keep it from sliding into the curb. I was so focused on not dropping it there I was in much too high gear to go up the hill in the alleyway, so I damn near stalled it right there too. Get up to my place, and I figure to stash the bike between my in-laws' 5th-wheel RV and my work van, so it can't be seen from the street, and the parking pad at this time is gravel, and in my adrenaline charged state I try to turn sharp and brake at the same time and proceed to drop the bike. Anyways, I managed to get the bike stood up after some trying and stash it, run inside and change quickly, and try to compose myself. Head back outside and do a quick walking tour of the block to see if there is any units driving around searching. All clear, so I opened the garage, grab the bike and park it inside. Walk out of the garage and close the door just in time to see/hear the police helicopter flying by directly overhead and carrying on ! 5/7 most scared/adrenaline jacked up I have ever been. Still getting the shakes while typing this, 6+ years later. I have 2 that I feel comfortable telling, one where I lost, and one where I won. First, the one where I lost. I was driving to a friend's house on Street Patrick's Day to finish putting a new motor in his car. I'm driving through the town I used to live in and about to pass the local bar when someone almost bones me coming out of the bar. I honk and rev my car and the dude absolutely loses it. He starts to tailgate me and starts flashing his lights, then drives up next to me on a main road. I dip onto a back road and lose him for a little, then I pull up to this 4-way and he comes flying up behind me, stops and gets out with a gun. So I hammer it down another back road. Now on the road it's a long straight that leads to a small tunnel that has a sharp turn just after it. So all down the straight him on it, then coming up to the tunnel him hard on the brakes enough to rotate the car around the turn so I can make it around it at speed. During that I see headlight pop up behind me, so I then get on it even harder around a real twisty and turny road. I come up to a second small tunnel with a really long smooth straight with a light curve in it, so I'm all on it and I see the headlights slowly disappear. I then turn on my buddy's road and hammer it up to his house, and since he lives on a dirt driveway I can't drive fast on it, so I pull into his driveway and turn my lights off and cruise up his driveway when I see the headlights turn in and then turn on the red and blues. At that moment I'm like, fuck and thank God. I stop and the cop gets out and runs up and starts yelling at me. Apparently he was sitting on the first straight and got me going past at 85 to 90, so he pulled out to pull me over and saw me drift the turn and then tried to catch up to me but lost me on the really long straight. But before he lost me, he clocked me at 125 miles per hour. He caught back up to me when he saw me flip my lights off going into my buddy's driveway. So has yelling at me and telling me how dangerous it was to drive like that. I tell him about the other guy and he said that's bullshit and that I need to tell the truth. So after a little back and forth I say that I was just driving then. He accepts that and then gives me 8 tickets for speeding, reckless driving, and a bunch of other stuff. But the only reason he didn't arrest me was because he had to go catch drunks. Now the second time, this one's a bit shorter. I'm street racing down a local highway doing rollers. This Mustang and I line up and do a pull. We pass a cop on the side of the road doing about 130 to 140. The cop pulls out and the Mustang lets off and starts braking. I stay in it and see the cop pull over the Mustang, and then a little down the road I see a cop with lights on pull onto the highway. I go dark and take an exit off the highway onto a back road, and I then hammer it down the back road to a buddy's house and pull into his garage. I proceed to rip my red wrap off and then leave the next morning. To college stories. One where we got away and one where we didn't. Got away. 3 friends and I were in college in far northern New York State at our fave bar, getting hammered. When the bar closes at 2 AM, we all decided that we were hungry, but nothing nearby was open, and we had no food at our house. So, we decided to do the obvious thing and head up to Montreal to get some pizza. My buddy is driving, tearing down these country road at 80 or so. The country there is sparsely populated, with rolling hills. As we crest one of those hills and enjoy the second of near weightlessness due to our excessive speed, we see a cop car coming toward us going the other way. The second we pass him, his brakes go on as he crests the hill behind us. My friend just hit the brakes and pulled into the first driveway we came to and shut the car off. We all ducked and waited. Less than a minute later, that statey comes roaring by, lights flashing. He didn't get a long or good enough look at the car to identify us. We decided that maybe our Canadian pizza was not worth it, turned around and made it safely home. Point, did not get away again during college. Rather than take a bus, I had arranged to get a ride home during winter break with a student I didn't know, along with 2 other guys. We were on the way back to school, and this guy's hauling us. He was kind of a dick, and his driving did not inspire confidence. Sure enough, we drive past a speed trap and a state trooper comes after us. It's the middle of the day, we are in the middle of nowhere, and Dick decides he's going to try to lose them. We all told him to pull over. His plan was not a good one, but he just peels off onto a side road and floors it. Very scary. Big surprise, he did not manage to lose the cops. He pulls over, and 2 troopers come up to the car. One removes him from the vehicle and marches him back to the patrol car. The other leans in to look us over. None of us were drinking or smoking. We were all straight. He asks us a few questions as he looks around the car, then spies a donut box on the back seat. What's in the box? He asks us. Donuts. I say, maybe I had better take a look at these donuts. He smirks and gestures at the box. I open the box and show him the assorted donuts we had picked up for the ride. Without batting an eye, he asks, "Are they good donuts?" We offered him one, told him we didn't know the driver, and would be happy if he got a ticket. P.S. Dick tried to charge us the cost of his ticket when we got back to school. Sorry pal, that one is on you. It wasn't quite running from so much as very narrowly just didn't get caught, but I feel like it's close enough to count, and it's a fun story point. When I was 16, a group of friends, including my cousin, and I had a very juvenile and very horrible hobby where we would set porta potties on fire. We did a number of them one summer with different methods, regular gas, gammed fuel. One time we filled it with pine straw and then lit the pine straw on fire and then pitched a can of butane in it. One time we made homemade napalm. It was pretty horrible of us. We carried this over into one more mission right around Christmas. There was a construction site right near the annex building to our school and there were 4 porta potties lined up in a row. We had our wheelman drop 2 of us off and drive around the block while we douse the insides in camp fuel. I'm in one and my cousin is another. We're waiting for wheel guy to get back. Through the vents I see a car coming, and just then my cousin yells, dropping the match. And I say no, wait, kind of a loud bang. All 4 toilets light up instantly. My cousin and I are still inside. We come bursting out. My cousin's jack and some of his hair had briefly caught fire. The car had slowed down and then sped up and drove away. Our driver friend comes and picks us up about 30 seconds later. We drive through the neighborhood briefly before driving back out, where we have to pass the scene of the crime. There is already a police officer there, getting out of his car to look at them. He must have been in the neighborhood on patrol. Allegedly broke into a tennis court. We actually broke into an abandoned school, but whatever. It was me and 4 other friends. 2 of my friends waited outside the fence. One friend got caught while trying to climb over a fence by a citizen. That friend pushed the citizen to the floor and ran away. Anyway, now it's only me and my other friend. We decide to go out of the backside, which is a tennis court, and it is not abandoned. Anyway, just about as we are about to exit the tennis court, an old lady shows up. My friend tells me to run and I tell him, "Don't worry, it's an old lady." 5 seconds after I said that bitch just took out her phone and was about to take a picture of us. We book it out of there, go back to the abandoned school, ignore the citizen, climb over the fence in 3 seconds or some shit, and then we just sprint to a park. That is 800 meters or some shit away. We get to the park, all 5 of us tired out from sprinting 800 meters. A friend comes over to us and says, "There are 2 officers searching for 2 teenagers with a green and white t-shirt." I had a white t-shirt on and my friend had a green t-shirt on. We just look at each other and just run a kilometer or something away, this time without looking back. One of my other friends decide to come with us for some reason, while the other 2 passed by the cops. Luckily the cops didn't question them. Anyway, so an hour later we went back home and everything was back to normal. Oh yeah, also, friend told me that the cops came to the park we were at and started questioning some kids there. I had a party at my parents' house while I was a junior in high school. They traveled often while I was at that age, so my house became pretty well known by neighbors that year. Mid-party, there's a booming knock at the door. Pretty easy guess who it is, seeing how the party has been going on for a couple hours and everyone knows not to use my front door. My neighbor, roughly my age, comes up to me and says, "If you don't answer the door they can't come in. They have to leave eventually." Being the stupid high schooler that I was, I believed him for all of 5 minutes, which feels like forever when police are banging on your door at this point. There are people booking it out the back door, over the fence, and through my neighbor's elaborate garden. That's a whole other story. I see flashlights start moving between windows on the side of my house, and eventually reach my back patio. There are still a ton of people hiding throughout my house, because the police had my house's exits covered. I walk outside to meet my fate, and it is a female police officer who is extremely angry. "You are getting a citation. Get everyone out of your house now." Great. I'm screwed. My parents are going to kill me, and I'm going to have this on my record forever. I go inside and tell everyone to leave and make sure there is no one left in my house. I walk back outside and find the female police officer is now with an older male police officer who seems to calmer and more forgiving. He says, "If you let us search your house to make sure there is no left inside, we won't issue a citation." At the time, I did not think anything of drugs being there or getting caught with them. My friends and people who partied were those who would not leave anything behind. Stingy in a way. But this is high school. You don't go to a house party and expect anything to be handed out for free. I'll let them in with no questions asked. I'm thinking, there's no one in my house, so if I get away with this, it will be awesome. They both walk into my house and split up immediately. The female officer goes straight to the basement and male officer through the kitchen and up the stairs. Hey, you can't split up. I actually said this. I followed the male officer upstairs. I have 2 older brothers, so we have 3 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. He walks into my middle brother's room, turns on the light, looks around and exits. He walks into my room, turns the light on, looks around and exits. Can we hurry this up, please? I was a little drunk and annoyed because I was certain no one was in my house. He peers into my oldest brother's room with his flashlight. He doesn't enter. He doesn't turn on the lights. Nothing. We go back downstairs and meet up with the female office, who is clearly disappointed she didn't find anything. They say thank you and leave. No citation. Woo. I was so pumped. All I could do was go sit on my living room couch and take a sigh of relief. Not 1 second goes by when my phone starts ringing. It's one of my best friends. I answer, "Hello." He whispers, "Hey, op, are they gone?" I start screaming and yelling, "Where are you?" Turns out he was in my eldest brother's bedroom behind the door. He could see the officer's entire body and face through the crack on the door. TLDR, I had a party where the cops came and searched my house during a party to make sure no one was there after they told me to kick everyone out. My friend was hiding behind the 1-bedroom door. The officer decided not to check. I remember many years ago I was driving home from an interstate trip and nearing state lines at the end of my trip. I was driving about 120 miles per hour under a bridge when I saw the officer put away his laser and rush into his car. My immediate reaction was to brake a little, but then I remembered I had a warrant for my arrest for an unpaid ticket and missing my court date, so I decided to punch it and take my chances, since I would certainly be arrested if I pulled over anyway. It was around 5 PM on a Sunday afternoon and there was some traffic congestion, but I fancied myself a racer, so it wasn't too big an obstacle in my mind. I watched as the officer flew down the ramp and closed the gap as the sea of civilian vehicles parted ways like Moses crossing the sea. I pushed my engine to its limits, going dangerously fast in traffic, splitting lanes even. The officer was only a few car lengths away, and I began to panic. I approached a semi in the far left lane and rolled the dice. I dropped to 3rd gear and took the shoulder. There was less than an inch between my left mirror and the concrete barrier and the same between my right mirror and the semi. I made it through and let out one of the most relieving exhales of my life as I watched the officer fail to fit in the gap. I pushed far ahead with that chance and made it across state lines. I took the first exit and pulled into the nearest neighborhood and reverse parked in a random driveway, sitting there for about 30 minutes before moving to local roads the rest of my way home. I'm glad I didn't cause any injuries. Now that I'm an adult, I realize just how dangerous pulling a stunt like that was. Copy and paste from a previous sub. Okay, I'll make this as short as possible. My buddy's brother got into a bar fight with an off-duty cop. Cop gets beat up while me, and 2 other friends just watch. Off-duty cop call police and tells them that we jumped him. Gives police our description. I know I had a warrant at the time for traffic stuff, and my friends, well, they just don't mesh well with authority figures. We decided just to walk home because we all live pretty close. 2 friends go one way, I go another. They get hassled by cops only a few blocks away, and for about a block, this is the only way I can go. Since the guy gave them my description, I took my had ANF shirt off to show just my white tank underneath. With one friend in a cop car and the other in handcuffs, I jog right past them about 8 feet away. Late night joggers aren't exactly uncommon at 11 PM during the summer here. I get to the corner of the street about 15 feet away, and under the street light, I check the watch I don't have on, did some stretches, and was on my way down the road. It faking worked. Multiple street racing stories. Got pulled over about a half mile from my house. Waited until the cop got to my rear bumper and let it eat. My garage/shop is in my backyard through an alley entrance and a 7-foot privacy fence. Luckily I left it open because I was combing back right after some test hits with a buddy. Unfortunately it was a neighborhood cop who instantly recognized my one-of-a-kind hot rod. He actually left a note on my front door telling me cut out your stupid shit before you kill someone. He pulled me over a couple weeks later and ripped me a new one. Not arrested, not even a ticket. Around 15 me and a buddy and some girls were driving around in my buddy's old 1980 something ambulance. We looked too young to be driving. The cop made straight up eye contact with us while driving in the opposite direction. The cop hauled us around the corner to cut us off, I'm assuming. About 100 foot up is a church parking lot with a white van, one empty spot, and another white van. We pull in between the two vans and wait it out as the cops passes us like 3 or 4 more times looking for a white 1980s Ford ambulance. It scared those girls pretty good lol. Street racing again. Adrenaline was pumping pretty good. Just got done making a couple 140 miles per hour pulls with a buddy, and I pull a Pittsburgh left on a city bus. What I didn't see was the cop on the right side of said bus. As I was entering the highway, he lit me up. I just drop it down to first gear and let it rip second gear. Still have the hammer down. Run it all the way through third gear. I ran out of gear in about a half mile. Luckily he was nowhere in sight. So I get to the highway and take a few back streets to a buddy that lived close. I didn't get away totally free though. I bottomed out really bad and destroyed a set of $500 headers. I both got away and also got caught. I grew up in the country and about 7 of us decided to sneak out and meet up in the closest little town. We were all about 14 and had swiped whatever alcohol we could from our parents. We all rode our bicycles to town on a Friday night. We were hanging out at the school drinking and goofing around. Some of us may or may not have ripped some rain gutters of the school to have sword fights. We also had plans and equipment to TP and egg some houses. A sheriff came pulling in, and we all scattered. I took off across the playground hauling as in the dark and half drunk. My front wheel hit a big piece of wood, and I went as over tea kettle. As soon as I finished rolling I grabbed my bike and took off again. The sheriff had went the other way, and I got to a good hiding spot at the edge of a field. My house was the direction he was, so I just hung out there and waited. 2 of my friends ended up where I was, and we joined up. One of the others lived in town, so we rode to his house to see if he escaped. I ended up sneaking into his house and room and he wasn't there. We rode around town for a couple hours looking for our friends and dodging the cop. I finally gave up and headed home. It was about 6 miles back to the house, and I spent the whole trip looking over my shoulder. I made it home and was in our detached garage putting my bike away when the sheriff drove in the driveway. He drove around the circle drive and left. Still being drunk I figured everything was cool since he left, and I snuck back in the house. That's where I found my parents pointing loaded guns down the hall. The car woke them up, and they saw the top of my head as I walked to the house and thought I was a burglar. I told them I also heard the car and got up to check on it. They sent me to bed and stayed up to make sure everything was okay. A little while later my mom woke me up because the sheriff was there to see me. Turns out he caught one of my friends and he ratted everyone else out. We spent a good hour at the kitchen table where I denied being out and the sheriff said he knew I was. My parents backed my story since they had no idea what really happened. Finally I got so tired I just admitted everything so I could go back to sleep. I ended up being grounded for a while and having to pay my chef for the gutters. 11/10 would do it again. Cop pulls up when we were in a place we shouldn't have been. It was like 2 to 3 am. Nothing too malicious, just hanging out drinking and smoking. But we were like 14. We saw the cop through the windshield and he was the fattest cop on the force. So we were confident we could get away. Started running in a direction he couldn't follow us in his car. Jumped some fences. I get my pants stuck at the top of one of the fences and I'm just hanging there. I triggered a motion sensor and some guy lets his Doberman Pinscher out, and it starts running towards me. I somehow break free and scale the next fence faster than I ever have in my entire life. I lost track of my friend and start to double back the direction we came, but 2 streets up. As I approach the corner of the street, my friend starts running towards me, so I start running too, and we hide behind this garage. There's a cop on the street above, and a cop on the street below us, and they have spotlights out. I swear I thought they had us. Spotlight just barely missed us. As soon as the cops passed the corner we just start running towards my friend's house that's only like a block away. We made it to his house, chilled out in his backyard until the sun came up, and then I went home. I went back to the place we ran from a few hours later, because we'd left some stuff there. I get there and it's gone. I go to my friend's house to tell him the bad news, and turns out it was gone, because he went there like an hour before I did to retrieve it. We were young and dumb as hell, but man, I wouldn't trade times like that for anything. Set the Wayback Machine to 1981. I'm a junior in high school in NJ. Word has it there will be a monster kegger on the other side of town, atop a small hill in a secluded area. I arrive and start drinking. I meet Amy D, who I had a huge crush on. She had just broken up with her boyfriend. We talk, we kiss, it's magic, just like a Bruce Springsteen song. Suddenly, cop cars appear, light flashing. It's panic. The guy who paid the keg deposit is furiously hauling the keg down the hill, beer spraying everywhere. Kids are galloping down the hill, some of them right into the arms of the cops. Amy looks right into my eyes and says, "Take me to your car," but I'm a loser and I have no car. She runs off. By now the cops are closing off all the exits from the hill. The few guys left atop the hill are taunting the cops, throwing bottles and cups, yelling. I decided to follow Amy, but she had disappeared into the night. I stumbled and fell, and rolled down the hill, directly into a bunch of dense bushes. I could hear footfalls, so I stayed still. One thing I'll never forget, a kid I'll call Hayes was atop the hill, yelling, "Fuck you, cops. You guys suck. Why don't you leave us alone?" A cop responded from a bullhorn, "We know your voice, Hayes. We know it's you. Come down from there now." I thought to myself, Hayes is so fucking busted. As soon as I saw no one around me, I started crawling through the brush. It was pitch dark, which made my escape much easier. I eventually got to my feet and ran. I was a mess. Bloodied arms, scratched and dirty face. I made my way back to my part of town and told my friends what happened. They were nonplussed. The cops always ruin a good kegger. And worst of all, they ruined Amy and me. The bastards. Edit. This post got me thinking about Amy D, so I looked her up. She's married and living in a house about 1/2 mile from where the keg party happened. Me, I'm a continent away. Life is like that. In my younger dumber years I outwitted/outran the cops twice in my car. The first time I was coming home from laser tag at about 1 AM on a school night. My friend was going to come over and do something, but stayed behind to smoke a joint. I don't do drugs, so I left before him. The drive home was through back roads. I was heading down the Furs Road when I saw some lights turn onto it about 1/4 mile behind me. I thought it was my friend, so I started to slow down. That was when my radar detector went apeshit. I don't know why, but I de-iced to Geo. I floored my BMW and went sailing through the back roads that I knew really well. I hit the apex of every turn and actually held or even gained distance on the cop who was after me. My home was at a T-intersection with a pretty large road perpendicular to my path. I turned left into my driveway and went behind the house. I got out of my car and jumped in a bush, stupid, and watched as the officer raced up to the stop sign and made a lefty, though I had turned left on the bigger street. Got away scot-free. The other time was during the school year. I was one of 2 guys on the wrestling team. Everyone else quit over a bullshit protest on the coach, so me and the other guy would drive to another school at 5th period to practice with a full team. We were approaching the school when a cop car passed us on the opposite lane. I don't know why, but he threw his lights on and accelerated to the next break in the median to turn around. I got on it and hauled us to the parking lot. I pulled into a spot, and we hopped out, and headed into the school. Here came the officer in his car feverishly looking around for us. Never heard anything point. It was obviously stupid and don't recommend it. I will say that prior to running in either case I was no doing anything wrong that I was aware of. I just didn't want to have to interact with the police. I live on a pretty busy street, 2 lanes going in each direction, and I was taking a scenic route through the neighborhood just behind my street. I was about a block away from my house, going maybe a mile or 2 over the speed limit at most, when a police sub suddenly pulls away from the oncoming curb with his lights on. There wasn't anybody else around. I was the only car on the street anywhere 4 blocks. I don't know why he wanted to pull me over, but with the aggressive way he pulled out, I had no doubt in my mind that he was trying to get me to stop. I had a fight or flight moment and did some quick math. I was about 100 feet from the right turn. He was making a clumsy 3-point turn in my rear view. Knowing that this next block is only about 300 feet long, I punched it. If there had been any traffic on my huge busy street, I wouldn't have been able to pull out before the sub followed my right turn and saw which direction I was going. I glanced in my rear view once more and saw that I was just clear of his field of view. Maybe he wasn't even going to turn right and try to find me. I live only a few houses from the corner. I whipped into my long driveway and myself away behind my house, frantically checking my mirror. I saw the flashing lights blur past my house and down the street, so I parked my car and went inside with my adrenaline pumping. I should also tell you that I was on the phone, Bluetooth, hands-free, with my girlfriend at the time, so it was a very AWW fuck this, hold my beer moment. I guess my gut reaction was the hell if I'm getting pulled over for no good reason, so close to my house. Was at a house party when I was 17. Some dummers opened the door for the law, and in walked county sheriffs. I ran to a bathroom and walked in on a freshman with her pants around her ankles and puking in the toilet. I knew her and was gonna try and hide her in the linen closet too. In the middle of pulling this girl's pants up, undersheriff walks in. Looked pretty bad, I'm sure. Walks me out into the living room with around 40 others to start calling parents. My buddy looks me in the eye, his house, and motions for me to sneak off. I've sized up the cops, all 300-pounders, so I was pretty confident I wouldn't be caught as it was wrestling season, and I was in great shape. My buddy fakes a seizure, and I bolt. One cop is yelling, but I just kept going. Hit the backyard and go to jump the fence and I hear a loud freeze. I knew this voice. I worked out all summer at a local gym, and this was early 2000s when all the Oklahoma Highway Patrol went from being donuts to bezos. I lifted with 4 of them regularly, and this voice belonged to one of them. He was 6 feet 3 inches and an ex-college football player. I kept running, and he stayed right with me for over a mile, doubling back the woods I knew fairly well. I eventually bellied down by a fallen tree and waited him out. Walked back to the house an hour or 2 later and left. Getting gas the next morning at the local place right off the interstate, and in walks the guy. He asked me where I was with a smirk. Guess he recognized my truck. I denied everything else he lectured me about hanging out with the wrong people. As I left I said, "You lift lower yesterday? You're walking like your legs are sore, white kid in rural Oklahoma. You could get shot for that shit today." Late to the party, but I too played manhunt with a rather large group of friends. Probably around 15 in total. Everyone playing was between the ages of 14 and 16, and we would play at our old middle school. Now we weren't normie manhunters. We hopped around rooftops, wore all black, and even the occasional ghillie suit. Anyway, we are playing as normal, and I've situated myself on top of the music building, which was the tallest roof next to the gymnasium. One of my buddies, we'll call him Adam, was it and have the first encounter with an officer. He was running along one of the outdoor hallways and spotted what he thought was another player. It was dark out, so visibility was dull, but Adam is confused as to why the player wasn't running from him and asked, "Are you it?" The officer then blinds him with a flashlight and replies, "No, I'm a cop." So me on the roof sees other cop cars pulling in to block off the exits, and one by one the officers round up my friends. I was only 15 at the time, so I was a bit freaked out and decided to get off the roof and turn myself in. As I was walking towards the police, a few of my friends motioned me to run. I wasn't sure why, but I assumed the worst, so I stopped and ran back the other direction. I probably could have found 10 other places to hide, but I chose to hide in the lone porta potty behind the school. Remember, I couldn't leave because the exits were blocked off by other police. My logic was that if a cop checked inside the porta potty, I could play it off like I was taking a dump or hiding in there and was totally unaware that the police showed up in the first place. I must have sat in that stink box for 45 minutes before the cop car blocking off the rear exit had left. Also important note, I didn't have a phone on me. So now I'm at the school totally alone, but instinct tells me my friends were at our usual McDonald's a couple blocks away. I made my way over there and sure enough, everyone was there waiting for me to tell the tale of my legendary escape. The police ended up taking everyone's name, and seeing as we were all minors, just asked us to leave. I didn't know if we ran from the cops or not. My fiancée is foreign. I can't remember if it was her first or second trip to the USA. She's British. We were shopping in a not so good area that had a lot of cool little stores. I bought her this little purse with Indian designs and elephants on it. It was like $3. I happened to look at the receipt and noticed that one item wasn't listed. We were already on the road at that point. I figured I'd give them the money and buy some extra stuff next time we go in. To make up for it, we pulled into a public parking lot and were having a smoke, cigarettes, before going to a store across the street. Suddenly, there's a cop each at both of our windows. We weren't hiding anything, no drugs or anything like that, but in that moment I was like, fuck, that shop owner called police on us for stealing a $3 purse. My fiancee's gonna get deported. Fuck. They ask for ID. I give them my license. She gives them her British passport. The cop, she gave hers to eyes it for a minute, and then, wow, you're British. That's cool. How are you enjoying America? We're both white. If that wasn't clear by the context, they ended up explaining that they rolled up on us because the previous day, a couple who looked similar to us parked in that same spot and both did on heroin in their car with their child in the back seat. They were basically posted at that parking lot indefinitely to make sure the same thing doesn't happen again. I'm not sure I've ever been so close to my heart just exploding. The thought of getting mailed for shoplifting and her being deported and or banned from the country for years was physically sickening. Way late to the party, but here goes. I grew up in a large trailer park which was the largest in the county, 500 homes, and we all had a little cliques. Mine liked to smoke weed and cause mischief like most teens anyhow. There was an overpass near the front that we would go sit under to smoke weed and cigs and maybe drink a couple beers. We whistled from the drive-thru across the way. So we were walking there one night and there were road signs with the flashing lights on them on the way to smoke from a toilet paper roll. There were about 8 of us, so obviously we didn't think we'd draw attention to ourselves at night as we picked one up to carry it to the hangout point. Bad mistake. Apparently we walked it past a few houses and one of them might have called the cops. We got there with the sign with the lights, inconspicuous, right? No. We packed up the homemade bowl and began to pass it around. When it came to me, I saw some lights coming towards us, so I looked up. Cops. I threw the bowl and we all took off running down a large hill. Complete mayhem. People are screaming, dogs are barking, kids and flashlights everywhere. We all ran down that dark wooded hill like lightning. I lost my footing and fell about 8 feet into a creek, struggled to get up and kept running. Tumbled head over heels for a good 20 feet through leaves and sticks and whatever else there was, and finally came to a stop where I was on my back mostly covered with leaves. The cops conducted their search and collected about 5 of my friends. At one time, I was about 10 feet from the cop and his dog, so I have no idea how I wasn't found. I'm leaving it to the creek and the leaves. I stayed there until I fell asleep and woke with the sun. There were a couple others that got away, but they just kept running. I didn't need that sheet when I was 16. Wasn't me but happened to a friend. 2 friends and I went to Ultra Music Festival in 2013. We got split up on the first day and one of our tickets was stolen out of our backpack. In hindsight we could've probably gone to one of the booths and explained them the situation and get a new ticket, but my friend volunteers to sneak in the next day. We hopped on the metro and drank a Gatorade bottle of Everclear each on the way there, so safe to say we were pretty intoxicated. We tried the I'll use one ticket for the both of us trick, but we are caught immediately and he gets booted out of there. Distraught, he runs into some cops ripping up fake tickets right outside of the venue. He starts yelling profanities at the officers about how much the tickets cost and how it wasn't fair. Cops slam him to the ground and throw him into a van full of piss-drunk people heading to the jail. This was a senior year of high school, so getting arrested meant the possibility for your colleges finding out. He started talking to another guy was on acid, asked him if he did something crazy right now, if he could make noise. Before the guy could reply, my friend flops on the ground and fakes a seizure. Paramedics show up and try to wake him, but the combination of alcohol and adrenaline allowed him to fake being knocked out. They took him to the hospital, where they gave him some water. The doctor told him just sit tight, the cops will be here in a secretary to take you to the station. He asks him to grab him a cup of water and books it straight out the door. He was still at a 9/10 on the drunk scale and in a completely foreign city. Took him 3 hours to get back to the hotel after passing out on the metro ride home. Woke up to random people recording him with drool coming out of his mouth. Lol TLDR friend runs off from a drunk tank heading to the station. I want to say about 10 years ago we were 16 beer pong in a buddy's basement on the weekend. We live in a small town and he is in a little suburb-esque neighborhood. We are all quite drunk and are on journey to our local Max Milk, a Canadian convenience store chain. Along the way we are being general dumb facts. Stealing patio furniture to place in the middle of the street. Straight up breaking potted plants. Trying to open car doors. A general sense of mischievous one-upmanship was taking place. Point we get to the store and just drunkenly start grabbing things. I myself managed 2 bags of chips, 3 Borno mags and a jumbo bag of mini eggs. There were 7 of us, and not one of us said anything to the clerk. We all just walked out with our sheet. We are walking through a park on the way back to play some more pong. It must have been around 1 or 2 AM, quite dark. We are all bragging about our loot when we see sirens. My hoodlums yells, pigs. As we all start to sprint away. The trick here kids is to be the fastest, but faster than your friend's girlfriend with the huge titties hitting her in the face. There was a public sidewalk between 2 backyards which led to a suburbia maze. I sprinted right through and soccer slide tackle behind the first tree I could find. Heart racing, I watched as one cop ran right past me and down an adjacent street. I knew I wasn't safe being out on the street, so I started going through backyards. I lived about 10 kilometers away. There was a very slim chance I could splinter cell my way for that long in my state, so I decided beer pong man's house was the best place to head. Hoping through backyards like the scene from Hot Fuzz, I'm stopped by an ambient glow from someone's upstairs deck. Turned out to be a patio light that changed colors. I decided I wanted it. Start climbing their patio to hear the most terrifying voice of my life through the sliding door in front of me. Get the fuck out of here. Fuck the cops. I ran into the street and across to another backyard. Spent another 45 minutes or so sneaking through yards and eventually make it to my buddy's backyard. Fell asleep on his back porch on his mom's porch swing. I'm shook awake by his mother, who is surprisingly calm at 5 in the morning and offers me a ride. During said ride I'm informed that the police were questioning my friends about me inside the house while I slept on the porch swing. Everyone had to pay a fine, but no charges were laid, and the cops didn't even mention the thievery from the convenience store. Point I paid half of all the fines for all my friends for keeping their mouths shut. Bunch of good fellas theys. I'm standing in the basement, and I'm holding a red cup. You've seen movies, and I'm standing there, and I'm holding a red cup, and I'm starting to black out. And I guess someone said like something police, and in a brilliant moment of word association, I yelled fuck da police. Fuck da police. And everyone else joined in. 100 drunk white children yelling fuck da police with the confidence of guys who have like already been to jail and aren't afraid of it anymore. You know that, like I served my nickel, you come and take me confidence, but white children. The reason someone had said something Something police was, because the police were there. So a Chicago police officer walked down the stairs and got to the bottom of the basement and looked out over a sea of drunk toddlers yelling "Fuck da police" in his face, and he was almost impressed. He was like, wow. And then he leaned into his walkie-talkie and went get the paddy wagon. And my friend John, who is now a father, this man now has a baby, he grabbed a 40, smashed it on the ground, and yelled "scatter." And everyone ran in a different direction. We all ran in different directions. It was like that scene in Ratatouille, when the humans come in the kitchen and all the rats go in different ways. We all ran in different directions. I ran into the laundry room, and I jumped on the washing machine, and I crawled out through a window into the backyard, and now I'm running through the backyard, and there's this big chain linked fence, and I thought I've never climbed a fence that high before, and then I woke up at home. First real party, about 80 to 100 people. We were out in a fairly rural area off of a highway. I was 19, just started drinking. Party was busted at like 10:30 p.m. Everyone scatters into the woodland area surrounding us. I'm sprinting forever before I eventually run into a random group of partiers. We split up. I join up with 2 others where we sit and wait for about 20 minutes and spy on the cops from a distance. One of the 2 with me went to preschool with me actually, was wearing a big white t-shirt. One of the cop cars pull out and start to leave. There was probably 8 cop cars. The headlights graze past us, and the guy wearing the white shirt is illuminated. We split up as the cops notice us and start chasing after us from across the field. I hop over a barbed wire fence and sprint across a cornfield like my life depends on it. I get about halfway down the field when I realize no one is chasing me, but I keep going. I reach the highway and cars are about to come by, including cops, so I drop in the tall grass and lie still. They don't notice me. This happens a few times before I get across the highway and start heading towards some houses. The worst part of all of this is that I had no phone. All I had was an iPod to text with when I had Wi-Fi. So I'm roaming around looking for Wi-Fi in the yards of these country homes, hoping I don't get shot on sight. About a half mile or more from the party location point I never find Wi-Fi and eventually start running down the highway. After a great distance, I come into a town. My ankles were in so much pain. I stop to look, and they are cut so bad right on my Achilles that they are bleeding and stuck to the shoe. I keep going. I'm finally in the heart of the town, Colfax, Iowa, where I see 4 random teens sitting in a circle looking at their phones. I ask to borrow one. Call a friend whose number is stored on my iPod, and he picks me up. He ended up being a DD because the party was busted. Before he could even get there, I stop at his place, get myself together, and get home at about 5 a.m. It was insane. Drunk as balls driving home after a party. I was young and dumb, spare me the lecture. I was doing pretty well though. I had had lots of practice up to that point, so much practice that I didn't give a second thought to my suspended license, registration, and lack of insurance coverage while on my journey home. But then I saw those headlights in the distance. Those menacing rectangular jobs with the rounded corners that almost seem to pulse a little because of that bar they have on the front end. I knew they knew I was up to no good. So, I blasted through the one roundabout, at the time, in my town, knowing that my recklessness would buy me the extra seconds I needed to get to the gated community up the road. I had friends in Caucus who lived in there, and knew that the HOA had worked out an agreement with local PD that kept officers from entering the community without there being a call from a resident. I slept in my car, and went to work the next day. I sold cars at the time. 2. I went to a party in the woods I grew up running around in about 6 years after I'd moved away. I ditched the party because it was stupid. The walk back involved walking up some train tracks, during which time I saw those goddamn headlights again. I immediately dove through the bushes that lined these train tracks and made my way to a footpath. I had a pretty good idea where I was despite being drunk and getting ready to drive again, all my holier than thou fellow Reddit folk, and started up this hill, then across this small ridge, and eventually down to a small creek I'd have to cross using a dumpy little bridge. Halfway to the bridge I hear voices and see flashlights coming from a side path I'd forgotten about. I turn to go back up the hill, but see more flashlights. Panicked, I decide I'm gonna go down the only other side path available. It ended in a small group of shrubs and undergrowth that would put me not quite 10 feet from where the cops would be junction with the main path. I crouched down and held my breath, like I was in faking numb or something, and watched as a group of officers stopped at the main path and waited for their buddies. I listened to them as they discussed, the only reason to be out here is to party, drugs, booze, whatever. I overheard one say, I know he's back here. We saw him run right through those bushes. And then they all faked off somewhere in the woods. I waited about 15 minutes before I made my way back to my car and drove home without incident.